Hello, hello, good evening. Camera looks funny in this overlay. 1 second. Oh, yeah, it's because I was messing with it for game night the other night. Sorry, I'm looking over to the right at my screen that has OBS on it. And I guess my color looks fine. This is fine. This is fine. Let's move that over a little bit, get me kind of centered. There we go. All right, that's better. All right, everybody. Good to see everybody. Thanks for coming in and hanging out. We've got Danger Hobo, Shimpasta, North End Trooper. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me this evening. I just wanted to, I have to. It's kind of shameless. I did want to just, jump on the bandwagon and do a little bit of watching of these videos and reacting to them. Even though I've already I saw them live. I was hanging out with North End Trooper. We watched them all live. As part of my process for digesting all the information that we get for the Star Citizen development, I rewatch most things 2 to 3 times. Every ISC, every Star Citizen Live, I reread everything, a couple of times. A lot of times, like the monthly reports, I'll read them 3 times and then I'll have them read to me a couple of times just to make sure I don't miss anything, make sure I'm reading things in appropriate context. So this evening, I wanted to watch the first panel, the Shaping the Verse, the Future of StarEngine with you guys. And we'll be taking little breaks here and there just to talk about things that are said, and to put things into a little bit of context, especially in regards to what has been said in the monthly reports and development leading up to this, relevant to the different segments. But I think, and I wanted to see what you guys thought looked best. I think what I'm going to do is when we watch the video, when we're watching the video, I'll have it in the next screen where you can see chat. And then when they go to play a clip to show what they're talking about, I'll put it in a full screen. So let me know what you guys think about that in chat, and because I am going to upload these to my YouTube afterwards. Yeah, North End Trooper and I were at the airport for, gosh, like 7-8 hours. Waiting for our flight because we luckily got on the same flight on the way home because North End Trooper and I both live in Boise. We're currently planning another Bar Citizen event, so looking forward to doing that. But yeah, we got to start recapping everything and batter our thoughts around. But yeah, it was me, him, and Tickles hanging out and hanging on. The Prisoner, good to see you. Thanks for coming in and hanging out. So let's go ahead and get into the other window. And then from there, we'll start watching and commentating. Let me know what your thoughts. I want to hear what, this isn't so much me reacting to it as it is, I want to see your reactions to it, and hear your thoughts. Cause I've really only talked about it, these panels with the people that I was watching them with. Treeson, from the Astropub Discord, he and I and Dell, who's in my Discord, Dell Anar, in the Astropub Discord, North End Trooper, and a few others were there live together hanging out. And so we got to, talk about things after each panel, but I want to hear what you guys have to say, because, more perspectives, and more eyes on things is better for understanding. So let's go ahead and switch over to the other window. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I'll put the... So here is the CitizenCon 2953, Shaping of the Verse, the Future of StarEngine. I'm going to drop the link in chat for you guys, and that way if you want, you can save it for later. And then this already has 107,000 views. Obviously, it doesn't have 1,000,000 views like the Squadron trailer, it's not a trailer, but the Squadron video, which I'll be watching. I'm probably going to do that one on Saturday afternoon, along with the Navigating the Universe, the UI panel. And then from there, we'll move on to the others. But I'll post it up in my Discord and on Twitter. And so the really nice thing is that CIG went ahead and put in the timestamps down here. So when you're watching it, especially being referring back to things later, you can open up the description and you can see the timestamps. But let's go ahead and let's see. North End Trooper says that's why we all missed the yacht club picture, face first into the food. Yeah. So let's go ahead and get started watching this. And the from what I hear, the trailer thing, the StarEngine trailer that they recorded, they're going to re-release it to us. There are some issues with the um, the rendering of it, I guess, for how it was presented to CitizenCon, and so they just went with what they had. But they're gonna, I guess, redo it and upload that later separately because it's not in this part of the presentation. This was only supposed to be like an hour and 15 minutes. It ran like, because they showed us the trailer, it ran like 30 something minutes long. Yeah, they always do a press version. They're definitely going to do a press version. Just like, the Squadron 42 held the line, I held the line video. This is press quality. So what we'll do is I'll open it up right here, and that way it's big on the it's big on the screen that you guys are looking. And then what I'll do when they go to play a clip, so that way you guys can see it in like all its glory as we're talking about it, I can switch to this screen. And that way you guys can see everything for when they're doing the little graphical videos and stuff. So let's go ahead. But this way I can record all the chat. So let's go ahead and go back to all right, let's go ahead and make sure the audio is all the way up. Okay. Definitely showed a lot more.
Bonjour! Bonjour, CitizenCon! We are so happy to be here. It's been so long to see you guys physically and just being able to interact. It's been fantastic so far, and we're super excited about all this. The video you just watched outlined a lot of features in StarEngine. It's a reminder of what makes this game so special. It's a focus on fidelity. I said it. It's a focus on immersion. And it's a focus on seamlessness, being able to go everywhere.
Echo. Why is it echoing? Let's see. Sorry about that. Sound settings. Let's see. Wavelength system. Was it a loud echo? I haven't done anything different in ages with any of this. Let's see. So outputs the system, and then input captures wavelength stream. Was it like a little echo? Like, could you hear it from my headphones going into the mic? Oh, I think, no, that's not it.
And you're just there. The accomplishments from the tech teams at CIG have been numerous in building all the technology that allow you to run the game. And
Still an echo. Where the hell is the echo coming from? Oh, maybe if...
allow you to experience the same things that we see in our dev setups. And so what we're about to see today is a deep dive into all these features. But first, I wanted to touch really quickly on this last year. We have launched persistence, or added persistence.
That's really weird that it's never done that before. Huh. Good to know. Hey, Radarid, good to see you. Radarid and I got to meet in person, which was pretty awesome. Got to give him one of the patches. So, okay, so we fixed it, but now we know. The only problem is the sounds for all my little sound alerts play through that, so those won't work. Yeah, I'm super excited with how that patch came out. Real looking forward to getting my hands on the Loot Goblin patch. So keep an eye out for that. I'll be announcing it on Twitter and on in my Discord. But when I get those, I'll get that order, and then I'll place the next order for the next round of the patches that I already have. And that way, when I get both orders, is when I'm going to launch the merch store. And that way people can buy them, and the proceeds will go to charity. It'll just be for sale at cost, for the cost of production, plus shipping, plus $250 for the, and that $250 is a donation to charity. All right, so let's get back into this. Very interesting to me that, when they talked about StarEngine, I wasn't expecting them to go over as many of the things as they did for StarEngine. It really goes to show you how impactful the work on the engine is for so many things that we've been wanting, and things that a lot of other gamers take for granted, that people don't realize is part of the engine and the work on the engine.
It's been a rocky road this year, and I want to thank you guys for keeping on playing, giving us a hand, giving us good bug reports. It's been fantastic for us to improve the stability of the game, so thank you so much. You guys deserve a hand of applause. Thank you so much. I just want to touch on one bit, which is that all the people you will see in the next couple tech panels are really the best of their crafts in the world. They are infused by a value that we tremendously value at CIG, which is relentless optimism. That this game can be made, that this vision can be achieved. And so, without further ado, but first, I got one more thing to say. So, in all of the different panels that you'll see, all the updates, everything that you'll see on screen, whether it's a HUD, an MFD, a ship UI, FPS weapons, everything, all of this is new. So as you watch the clips, you're going to see some differences. That's because this all comes from the freshest implementation that we have. We love open development. We love to show you guys the work in progress. And so that's exactly what we're going to look at today. And so without further ado, I'll leave you with Marco, who will show you all the cool and amazing features of our engine and the challenges that we face. Thank you so much, guys.
So the other thing that I'm going to do as we're watching this, and as we go through and watch the other panels, when I stream them and react to them to like this as they release on YouTube, I'll be continuing that over the weekend and into next week, is I'm making a list of all the things that they mentioned for Q4 2023. Everything coming out in the Q4 patch, which we're assuming is 3.22. And so there are a few things here in the engine panel that are that they say are slated for Q4 2023, and I imagine we'll start seeing some of those things pop up on the roadmap. Next week, I think, is when we're due for our next update. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Next week. Next Wednesday.
Thanks, Benoit. Hello. I am Marco Corbetta, VP of Technology, and we're going to talk about StarEngine today. We have been developing StarEngine for many years with the goal of creating an online living universe. But creating a universe is not an easy task, and even more difficult to do everything seamless without any loading screens or invisible walls. And massive spaceships flying very fast, close to the terrain and objects, are pushing the limits of procedural generation, and streaming. This is not a single-player game, so creating this universe online is making everything more challenging. We stream and generate physics on server on CPU, and we already support more than 100 players.
Creating an online, seamless, open universe engine makes everything even more challenging. I don't want to say that was a shot across the bow, but that was a shot across the bow. For everyone who is like, oh, look what Starfield did, and they did it in 8 years. It's like, yeah, because they had a much easier task. It is monumentally easier to not only do things for a single-player game, single-player environment, but also to do it in a not open development, not we're constantly have to constantly polish it and bug fix it so that we can play it. All that slows it down tremendously. So it's the nature of the beast for the development model that they chose in order to fund the game. All these things could not you couldn't fund Star Citizen and its development without it being an open development. In order for us without us playing our ships, no publisher would ever fund this project because it's insane. And it's a level of R&D and risk that no one would take
on a single server, more with server meshing. To support all this, the engine must do a lot of work every frame. So in a typical StarEngine frame update, we got up to 64 hardware threads, about 200 software ones, over 700,000 streamed in entities and millions of entities overall in the solar system, about 150,000 updates per frame. We have over 200 vehicles, spaceships, and ground ones, over 2 million physical objects, over 100,000 objects generated per frame when flying over the terrain. We have many unique locations, streaming on demand, in a seamless, gigantic space. Also, we are supporting many new features that we are going to showcase today. I'm going to start in introducing the new and improved clouds and fog, worked on by Custom Vendor in the R&D team. The first new feature is the light shafts. They are volumetric shadows from clouds cast into the atmosphere. They are truly volumetric and 3D, fully integrated. They are not just a post effect, as it is usually done in games. With this, the atmosphere from an overcast sky gets darker, and this is important for planets and locations with bad weather. Another component is the new ground fog. It follows the terrain up to a specified elevation for different locations. It is also fully integrated into the atmosphere. It receives volumetric shadows from clouds and terrain. It reduces the light scatter into the view ray.
So these two things that they just talked about, the light shafts and the ground fog, I think are really going to make things interesting, not only for flight, because of the amount of light that makes it through the clouds and changes how light and or dark it is depending on the amount of cloud cover, which is going to affect your visibility. But also the ground fog and where it appears and what locations are within and enshrouded by fog, I think is really going to make an impact on FPS gameplay, especially affecting how far you can visualize things. It'll be really cool to see how thick that fog can end up being, and how that impacts our ability to just navigate around on the ground, and not just the the many particles that you see get thrown up in the wind, like from the dust and the snow on the planets we have, but the actual legitimate fog, and what's the visibility like, because that makes an impact. Like if you've ever flying in fog, and for me in real life is a very, very scary thing, and we don't do it because it's not safe, and it'll be really interesting to see how that all plays out. So let's go ahead and we're going to switch to the other screen. That way this is extra big on the stream.
And in this video, we're showing all the features combined together. In addition, we made many improvements to cloud shaping to allow for more variation and details. The shape noise blending, a vertical variation, has been improved a lot.
Look at that dramatic difference with the light shafts and how bright things are. In these clips, these first few ones, the cloud improvements aren't as noticeable. But when they get to a different scene where they show you how like clouds that are lit differently, especially like from on top, it's insanely visible, the differences in the cloud and the noise. Yeah, and they're not done yet. Good evening, Socially Confused. Thanks for joining us.
Also, we made improvements to shorten long distance read, and the tiling is less visible.
Yeah, it looks so good. Especially because the fog catches the light and you can see it even in low light environments. And it really does a good job of, but with the changes in the lighting due to the clouds, it does a good job of breaking up the landscape. For the starker areas and lighter areas, it just adds a level of realism that we didn't even know we were missing. And now you're like, oh my God, yes, that looks so much better. The Prisoner says, so far I've only seen the engine, UI, and Squadron 42 vid. Yeah, they're good. They're really good panels. I know the VODs on Twitch are really long. And so a lot of people are waiting for them to pop up on YouTube. But, it was just incredible to watch live and in person. And it's when they do the sound bit, it was really impactful with the theater style sound that they had going on there. So it'll be interesting to listen to it on my headphones. Look at that. This is the one I was talking about. Oh. That noise. And then it's gone.
And
then the light shafts.
Best of all, we're going to include all these new features and improvements in the next 3.22 release. Okay.
There it is. There it is, everybody. Everything that we just watched, the fog, the light shafts, and finally fixing all that noise that is so apparent in certain settings with the clouds, depending on how they're lit. All that is aiming for 3.22, the Q4 patch. So, like I said, let's add it to... I'm going to copy this link. I'm going to add it to the list. I'll just timestamp it later.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm going to grab
To
that
include
timestamp
all
really
these
quick.
new features and improve.
Sorry, I'm just going to grab that timestamp. No! Oh, God. Going to grab that timestamp real quick. because I'm going to share this for everybody. That way everyone knows. All right. Continuing on.
Best of all, we're going to include all these new features and improvements in the next 3.22 release. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Fire!
Hi everyone. So I'm Mike Snowden. I'm the Director of Visual Effects.
And I'm Ali Brown, the Director of Graphics and Procedural Tech.
Thank you very much. Really happy.
So before we get started on the fire, does anyone have any thoughts on the clouds and the fog and the light shafts? I mean, to me, I think they look incredible. We have pretty good clouds now, but just the improvements of the clouds are pretty monumental. And then the light shafts and the amount, how much light comes through the clouds, really making the scene really differentiated between when you have a lot of cloud cover and when you don't, or when it's broken. Big time improvements to the clouds and the way that all looks. And especially because all that stuff is going to be tied, into the weather system, is being designed to tie into the weather system. So it'll be dynamic and, ever changing. It's going to be really cool to see it going forward. But the fact that we're getting that in the next patch, in 3.22 Q4, that's huge. So let's watch some fire. This is so cool. So smart how they did this. Looks so much better than other games.
Happy to be here, really excited to show you. We're going to be showing dynamic fire in StarEngine. So dynamic fire is a driver for gameplay in both FPS and multi-crew experiences. It creates emergent sandbox gameplay, and it can be used by designers to craft very dangerous scenarios for players. And as you can see from the video, it gets very intense. Okay, so how do fires start in StarEngine? Well, there needs to be a source of ignition, and there are multiple ways in which it can occur. For example, weapon impacts or misfires, explosions or damaged items, and the player needs to be alert to their surroundings with fire an ever-present threat. If a fire does break out, you're going to see it dynamically propagate through the area, causing damage to environment and player. And at this point, the player needs to limit the damage, of course, by extinguishing the fire in any way that they can. So when doing so, they're going to need to wear protective clothing to protect them from extreme heat. They're going to need to wear a closed helmet to protect them from smoke inhalation, poor oxygen levels. And there's actually multiple ways the fire can be extinguished, including the removal of heat, for example, using the fire extinguisher, which is my personal favorite. It's a lot of fun doing that. The removal of oxygen, for example, locking off the area, venting the oxygen, creating a vacuum. Or simply, the fire's burned so fiercely that it's done everything it needed to do. There's nothing left for it to destroy. And if you let it get this bad, it's probably time to consider repairing your ship.
Okay, so how do we achieve this from the technical perspective? Well, the first thing the artists and designers do is they mark up their scene to tell us what physical properties that each surface is made from, whether it's wood or metal. But not only on the surface, we have to describe what is behind the surface. You might see a metal panel on your spaceship, but has it got cladding or wiring behind it? It's important we know all this so we know how flammable it is.
So I heard someone mentioning when they were talking about this, they're like, oh, okay, great. They made this beautiful fire, but now they're going so in depth into all the materials and everything that it'll take forever for them to actually implement fire in the game because they have to go and mark up all these things. Well, he's going to touch on something a little bit later that changes that. And that's not where they are with it right now. They've been working on this for a long time. So that way it's getting ready to release to us. And the developers at CIG aren't, they don't, the only ship that it's done on is the Reclaimer. No. They've been going back and working on all the materials and the surfaces for a long time now, and so they're actually getting ready to move on to something much, much bigger. So we'll talk about that here in a second.
Then after this, we have to define all the physical properties that go with these surfaces. So, for example, what the mass is, the energy density, combustion temperature, air-fuel ratio. And we use all these physical properties and we sum them up in each voxel, which is a 1 by 1 meter cube. And then once we have these voxels, this forms the basis of our simulation. So then first thing we do is we look for sources of ignition and then we're off. So here's our debug mode that shows us what's going on in the simulation and is what we use to track it. And you can see these squares enlarging to show us where the fire is spreading. For each of these voxels, we're tracking the fire, the temperature, fuel remaining, the amount of smoke. And the fire is propagating via convection and radiation, which are both accurately simulated. And it's consuming the gases and producing the knock-on products as well as it goes. And because we're using a proper simulation, like Mike mentioned, when you vent a room, not only are you removing the oxygen and putting the fire out, but if the temperature remains the same, if oxygen is reintroduced, the fire will reignite and it will continue burning, just like it would in real life.
People don't realize how incredibly detailed this simulation is and how realistic it is. Everything that they just talked about, they went through and they simulated how fire will behave, in different, in an environment, realistically, with oxygen deprivation, with the amount of heat. They did research on, what firefighters call the tetrahedron of fire. And so they actually did research on that and they simulated how it would behave normally. So that way, if a room burns or something is burning and you vent the atmosphere to starve it of oxygen, but then you reintroduce atmosphere to the room too soon, while everything's still hot, it will reignite. And so that's the thing, is people would be like, oh, okay, I'll just vent the atmosphere, fire gone, and put it back in and go on about my way. No, that room's going to be off limits for you for a bit, for a period until everything cools down. And so there's going to be costs versus benefits. Do you fight the fire and cool the fire, smother it, or do you just vent the atmosphere and close off the room until you're ready, until the heat dissipates? Because as an engineer, they show you on the engineering and repair segment that you will be able to see the temperature within the room. And so you'll have to watch for it to get below a certain threshold in order to make sure that things don't reignite once you reintroduce atmosphere to the room. But yeah, let's see, who said it? Socially Confused asked, I wonder if they'll add burns. And yeah, they're definitely going to end up adding burns and a lot more injuries and illnesses. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they go about treating burns, because we are it was the first person panel, the one where they talked about how they used all the inverse kinematics for us to interact with things, push buttons and all that. They built that system so that way they wouldn't have to hand make animations for everything. And that system is what they were waiting for, and is they're building that system. That's the reason we have beams for so many things. And why medical beams are probably going to end up going away in favor of a more realistic system where you're actually injecting a medication just like you do on yourself, but you'll be doing it on someone else. But by using inverse kinematics, they don't have to set up the animation a million different ways. They just do tell you where the target is, and then by using an inverse kinematic system, it does most of the animation for itself procedurally at runtime. And that's how they make it more realistic. It allows them to get in the other aspects of the healing mechanic while they're waiting for the animations. The I do this to you and you get this effect. It's a temp placeholder thing. But we're going to be getting much more in-depth medicine stuff. And is it going to be Surgeon Simulator? Absolutely not. But I fully expect us to be doing, administering medications, good old hypospray in Star Trek, as well as doing, bespoke treatments, for certain things, to apply different things like splints or dressings, maybe even tourniquets. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. The Apollo's in development. Keep an eye out. Anyway, back to fire.
So what's next for this? So our focus has been on interiors, in particular spaceships, but all interior spaces really, and this voxel grid really helps us solve that problem. Our next focus is going to be on planets. Obviously, they represent a slightly different challenge, the vastness of them. We have to transfer this over the network and simulate it slightly differently, and we also have to render it at scale. But the way we've done it, the core tech we've used, we should be able to scale this up quite easily. So that's going to be our next focus.
The next focus is planets, which means they've gotten it done and working very well for ships and interior environments. The next level is being able to scale this up to for planets and exterior environments. So that'll be really interesting to see. Like, are we going to are they going to have wildfires? And if there are wildfires, like what happens? Do you just have to wait for the weather to put it out? Are we gonna have water bucket ships and you have to fly to a lake and drop water? How's that gonna work? How long will it persist? Like the burn scars on the environment. How far can these fires actually go? So it'll be really interesting to see how they continue to develop this and scale it up. But it's very heartening to see that the way they built it is meant to be able to scale, and it shouldn't be an issue. If wildfire port Microtech for a month, yeah, no joke. The good thing is Microtech's cold, so that'll help. But like other planets, the wind on Hurston and the grasslands,
Okay, so how do we create realistic dynamic fire visuals in StarEngine? Well, we start with the simulation, as just described by Ali, and this gives us the data we need to drive the visuals. Then we bring in the burn shader. So this can be applied to static environments, and we have a lightweight version of the shader for entities, which is kind of based on the dirt shader and wear. Then we've got the glow, which is an animated surface decal shader for static environments. This is where we start to bring in some nice motion. And then we bring in the GPU particles, which are spawning from voxels and in screen space. Obviously, these are doing a lot of the work visually. Then we bring in the lights. These are spawned for clusters of voxels as opposed to per voxel as an optimization, a cluster being a representation of voxels close to each other. And then we bring in the fog. So this is height-laid volumetric fog. The smoke fills the room, and it goes up to the ceiling before filling the rest. And we're simulating that.
I love how they simulated the smoke. Not only is there fire, and you're going to see the fire, and it's going to spread realistically, but the smoke goes up to the ceiling and then fills its way down. And having a fire, you might have a suit on that protects you from heat, but maybe you'll have to crouch to get low enough to be able to see, find the source of the fire. It's going to obscure your vision. You're going to have a hard time finding the source and fighting it and actually stopping it. It's going to be really cool to see. The other thing that I hope they will show us eventually is if you vent to the atmosphere, I'd love to see like you venting the smoke in the room, like see that come out an outlet, from a ship.
So to finish, we're going to take a look at all of that put together in the game. Thank you.
All right, let's watch this in the full screen view real quick. 1 second. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And so I don't know where they show it. Oh no, I think that was in the repair video where they have the engineer, where they come in from the outside and show the reclaimer like crashing down to a planet, and it's on fire, and you zoom in, or if I don't know if they just didn't pan switch cameras soon enough. Let's see. Let's switch back to the other view real quick. So socially confused, I would think that there would be a built-in fire suppression system in large ships, especially industrial. That's something you could consider. Those systems are very expensive, and they don't have like built-in fire suppression systems everywhere in Navy ships now, because of how expensive it is, and how difficult it would be to coordinate that, especially considering like people like, oh, why doesn't it have a halon system? It's like, well, the halon system kills people as well. Like it'll kill the fire, but it also kill people. And so it's a cost benefit thing of whether that makes sense. But they have talked about how they do want to have fire suppression systems in game that you as like the engineer can activate. And so I'm sure that'll be a thing eventually. It's just not there yet, but I imagine that would be on like the engineer's console, and you'll be able to, close the room and either vent the atmosphere or turn on your fire suppression system. And maybe it'll only be in some rooms, maybe it'll be in all rooms. Maybe it will require consumables, like you won't be able to, put out fires, throughout the ship. You might have enough to put out a few rooms or something like that. There's a lot more depth that can go into it, especially if something like that and it's just set off either by a push of a button or via the engineering UI, and then it's just an effect, essentially a room-wide effect of what they just showed with the fire extinguisher. That isn't a big ask. That's not some giant feature. That's a little bit more UI stuff and graphics, and getting added to the resource management and repair gameplay. So yeah, let's watch this segment with. I know someone was calling him the last waterbender in Paul's stream. I'm gonna call him Waterboy because he's like, in his early mid-20s, but he's a flipping genius, Yeah. With fire suppression down for maintenance. And that's the other thing. If your fire suppression system takes a hit in combat or something else happens, things don't always work. But we will have multiple tools to fight fire. Aqua Boy, yeah. Yeah. Oh, geez.
Hello, everyone. I'm Will Hain. I'm here to talk about water in StarEngine.
Yeah.
So, water is a huge part of both of our games, Star Citizen, Squadron 42, and we wanted to give it a major upgrade. We were going to set 3 ideas that we wanted to impart on our water. We want it to look as good as possible, obviously. We want it to look realistic. We want it to be beautiful. We want it to be in motion constantly. It should always be moving and always be reacting to everything around it, whether that be players or objects or vehicles. And we wanted this to work on the whole scales of all of Star Citizen, all the way down from footprints in puddles to enormous ships crashing into the ocean. I'm going to talk about our updates to the water rendering first, and then we'll move on to that other stuff I discussed. So first of all, the water shaders, particularly the ocean and the river ones, were in dire need of a major upgrade. They were currently using a technique called deferred shading, which is really fast and fantastic for opaque objects, but does not translate well for transparent ones, which of course water is. So the first step that we made was to transition to forward shading. That allowed us to introduce more physically based techniques, such as proper lighting, reflection, and refraction. It allowed us to integrate the atmosphere properly into our water lighting setup. And it also meant that we could get more fun techniques, such as wave crest backlight scattering, as adding better foam rendering, which includes halftone blending, surface haze, and much more detailed bubbles on the individual bits of foam. I've got some examples of that here. In this particular screenshot, you can see the icebergs in the near frame. You can see we're refracting the iceberg underneath. It's correctly refracted. In the mid frame, you can see that the iceberg is reflected back onto the water. That is now accurate. We weren't doing that properly before. Here you can see our accurate water lighting from this really beautiful mid frame.
This is probably on Pyro 3. Because I don't think we have the rivers and lakes, but I don't think we have anything like this in game right now. Has anyone seen anything like this? Because this doesn't look like, oh gosh, what moon of Microtech has the ocean on it? This doesn't look like that at all. But it's Pyro 3 is very cold and has a lot of snow, but we know it also has water on it.
You can see that the iceberg is reflected back onto the water. That is now accurate. We weren't doing that properly before. Here you can see our accurate water lighting from this really beautiful screenshot of the Gladius over the water. I love this one. So this is the objects under the water being correctly lit, which is new. And then we are applying the lighting changes from the specular highlights on the surface and also considering the lighting from the suspended particles in the water, depending on how deep and dense the water is, which gives us this really beautiful effect. This screenshot just looks good, but what is going on is that it is demonstrating that the atmosphere and the water are sorting properly. This looks like everything is normal, but it's challenging to implement with forward-rendered water and proper ray march clouds like we have in-game. Props to Alan, who works on all of this. I did the next bit. And here we can see the wave crash light scattering. See how the sun is coming across the back of those waves? It's lighting up the suspended particles in them. It just looks gorgeous. Here we have the multi-layered foam. And from a distance, we have both surface foam and subsurface foam rendering correctly, looking really, really nice. I've just got a video here before and after, first of all. This is our...
Let's put this on the big screen.
Our lakes on Stanton 4. Next, we have water volumes on Horizon. There you go.
So good.
And this last demo, this is a Clio on the Stanton system. This is what it currently looks like in game, and I think you'll agree, pretty dramatic difference.
Surfing and wakeboarding.
So the next bit that I want to talk to you that me and the team at Planet Tech and Graphics have been working on is, of course, water surface simulation. This has been an absolute pleasure to work on. So we had a few aims for this. We wanted it to be multi-input. We want physics to influence this. We want our MFX system to influence this. We want bullets. We want everything. We want high concurrency. You guys, it's a sandbox game. You're going to break it. You're going to stick 1,000 picos in our puddles. It's got to work. And it's got to be scalable. It's got to work from the tiny scales to the footprints in the puddles all the way up to, as I said, giant ships crashing into the ocean. So the technique that we chose for this is a form of surface wave propagation. It's GPU-based, it's highly realistic at a low cost, and it can be scaled for waves of different amplitudes. So we can have all of that built right in just by adjusting a few constants. I've got a demonstration here. We're going to have the player walking through the puddle. As you can see, as he steps, you get a bigger ripple, but even as he's stepping, the toe is being dragged through the water and moving the water accurately. This is not a cop-out. We're doing this in 3D. You see as I'm jumping. And then this next demo, we're going to fire some bullets. This is a bit loud, this one. Right, the one more thing that we had to look at. So it's all well and good, this working on a puddle, but Star Citizen is not made of puddles. It's made of oceanic planets. It's made of everything. We needed to make this multi-scale. So we wanted the water near and far, not just in a square around the camera. We wanted lots and lots at once. The solution we picked was a multi-region water sim. Now, this was really, really tricky to get right, but I really think we have now. Which basically means that we can dynamically allocate all of the simulation regions depending on what is colliding where and what resolution we need at what parts of the screen. We can optimize this very heavily to make sure that you get what you want to see at the right time. We still need to get that information onto the water, though, and that's a bit trickier. So what we devised is yet another set of regions. Now, the regions are slightly different. The simulation regions need to happen wherever something is contacting the water, and that needs to happen regardless as to whether you can see it, because if there's a collision going on there, I look away, and then I look back. If it stops going and has to restart, that looks bad. Whereas the water, we only need to know the total result when it's actually in view. So we have these new regions which cover all water in view. And the beauty of this is that we can use this for multi-input and multi-output systems. Anything can influence our water, whether it be the simulation, whether it be weather, whether it be VFX. And then anything can be affected by water now. So the water rendering reads from this, but then we can also spawn VFX particles from wave crests. We can add screen space effects. We can have a line across your visor. We don't have this yet, but it's accurate to the displaced water in front of you. We've got this technology now, so we can use it to influence any of our work going forward. And here's a really good video of some of it in action.
Oh, big screen. Okay, now play it. This is so freaking cool.
And I'll just let that play. This is the debug mode. Essentially, we're moving a sphere of basically infinite mass through the water. And as you see, if we pan out a bit, we make our sphere a bit bigger, we get a much different result from the sim. Spawning the foam properly. It looks really nice. Really happy with this one. So what I'm going to do in a second is I'm going to turn on the debug mode so you can see where the regions are. You see we've got these gray boxes. They light up green when there is a hit inside the box. We've also got different sizes going on. If you look near the shore there's a big cluster of text. That is a whole bunch of other regions because there's some stuff floating there causing little ripples that we can't actually see. And as you see, these scale properly. We can add the results from multiple sizes of simulation together, and they influence and interact with one another accurately. You see those big waves crashing over the little sim there. It works pretty nicely. I've gone ahead of my subtitles, but I'll just let that video play out. So, what does that look like when we bring it all together? What's it going to look like in game? Now, you did see a little bit of this in the StarEngine trailer, but actually, I think this video does a little bit more justice to it. So I'm just going to let that play out for you.
So much hype. So cool. Imagine what this looks like.
You're going to see the wake start to
with
happen
like an
behind us
Idris
there.
and all its VTOLs in place,
And from the
hovering above
cockpit
the water.
perspective, water droplets on the glass, thrown up from the water sim. This is what I'm
That's
talking about
cool.
using multi-output. And that's us. Thank you so much, CitizenCon. Handing back over to Ali.
It's just so incredibly cool. I don't think I've seen a better water simulation in a game. It's just absolutely nuts. I think the only way that could have been better had they actually gone, fuck the Idris, and crashed an Idris into a lake or an ocean. That would have been so amazing, because they were alluding to it. It's like, come on, just show me an 890 jump, just absolutely swan diving, into a lake. But yeah, it just that just looked absolutely incredible. But yeah, when do we get the opportunity to ride the wave in game? I want to ride the wave. Yeah, VTOL ships for the win.
Hello again. So, I'm here to talk to you.
Oh shit. Paul just raided with a party of 141. Sorry, Paul, I didn't even realize we were streaming. Thanks for dropping by and bringing everybody over. Hope you had a good stream. I think I didn't get to catch any of it today because I was busy. But 07 Treesan, good to see you. Treesan, how you doing? We're just going. I'm finally getting around to reacting and rewatching the Future of StarEngine video. So just going through and rewatching that, doing a little bit of light reacting to it, putting things into context, talking about things in relation to how they've been talked about in the monthly reports, as well as I'm working on making a list of all the things that they say during CitizenCon as I go through these different panels over the next several days. of people of things that they are planning for Q4 2023, or they say specifically 322. So the first one on the list is obviously the cloud improvements, the fog, and the light shafts coming through the clouds. That's all planned for Q4 2023. Which Space, Moo Hoodles 07, thank you for joining me. Thanks for coming in. Yeah, Treesan, I'm going to make that list as I go through these panels. I think on Saturday, I'm going to do the Squadron 42 trailer, and I think it's the character one is a little bit shorter, and so I'll do that on Saturday afternoon and continue the list, and then maybe I'll get to stream on Sunday, but I'll hopefully be able to have all these done over the next week. I'll upload them to my YouTube, and then I'll make a post on Twitter, as well as in my Discord and everywhere else I can find, in order to share the list, so that way everybody's aware of it. Execute, good to see you this evening. Hope you're doing well. So let's hear what Ali Brown has to say about. Let's see. This is the Blood, Sweat, Tears, Scope Shaders, HDR, Temporal Upscaling, and the Render Up to Date. So this is it starts off a little bit just really cool stuff to see, but then it gets real interesting at the end here. And what I'm doing is whenever they have a clip or a video clip to show, I just put it into the full screen, make it easier for everybody to see.
Today about a few other graphical things we've got coming in. I'm really proud of the work we've done on the fire and the water. They're both.
Treeson, thank you so much for the donation to stackup.org. Really appreciate it. $50. You are a mad lad. Cheers, 07s. Mad respect. Really appreciate it. As always, if you're new to the stream, if you haven't caught one of my streams before, all monetization I get gets donated directly and 100% to stackup.org. We're always raising money for stackup.org. And so what I do is when I get a payout, I just round it up to the next highest $50, and then donate that directly to stackup.org. And you can also do direct donations either via the link in chat, as well as the Twitch stream donation thing.
Amazing features. I'm going to talk to you about a few smaller features and a few longer-term R&D features we're coming in on the visual side. This first one, something we wanted for cinematics and telling a story, but also to tie into our active feature system, which is to get the face to tell a little bit more story on our characters. So this blood, sweat, and tears system is something we implemented recently, and it allows us to use a GPU particle simulation, which we project onto the face, and then we integrate it into the skin shader so we can get realistic reflection and refraction of water on your face. And we even make the skin go a little bit redder to simulate the extra blood flow when you're tired or upset.
God, that looks good. Looks so good.
So none of this is a pre-canned animation. It's completely dynamic. We have complete control over everything. We can keyframe every single tear if we want to. And we can even simulate blood, like here.
So my question is, are they going to start simulating a lot of blood? I mean, obviously there's a little trickle from the ear, a little trickle from the nose. It'd be really cool to see if these things showed up if you got an injury, like a tier 2, maybe tier 1 injury to your head in game. But if you get an injury, are you going to start? Are we going to start seeing blood coming out from underneath your armor or your suit?
So next thing I want to talk about is our scope shader. Design came to me telling me that they really wanted to up the game with our rifle scopes. They weren't quite good enough. They didn't really feel realistic for them, and they thought it was a real core part of the first-person shooter experience. So to give you an idea of what we used to do, we used to use these type of fake scope meshes, which you see here, which is where we type of slice the scope in half so you can see through it. And sometimes we put these big black planes around them to obscure your vision. And we put a bit of glass on the front of it, but there was nothing really to tell you that it was a lens. So we've worked on a new scope shader, which is now going to be on all of our scopes moving forwards. And I'll give you a quick show of what that looks like in game. So on the first scope here, we're going to see it's got a infinite projected.
Here, I'll make this big real quick. And this is a little small detail, but I think it really goes to show how much they care about those details and how much they really care about making the game look good, making things look as believable as possible in as many ways possible. if you've spent any time behind the glass, of optics, you'll know that what we have in game really isn't that realistic. It works, but it can definitely be a whole lot better. Trigicon costs more than Star Citizen. Yeah, no joke. I'm more of a Vortex guy. That's what's in my budget. So, but yeah, let's take a look at this. It's pretty cool, especially for eventually with VR, but also it will work really well if you're using the Tobii.
Red dot scope sight. We've got lens distortions. You can see this little refraction and bending of light on it. You see it works when you don't have to be actually holding the rifle for it to work. We've got a correct emulation of eye relief on the scope. So we have the blur, distortions, chromatic aberration. And then we've also got support for digital displays like this one, which has light amplification and has support for EMPs. If you get an EMP, you're going to have the display is going to get distorted. So we're quite proud of this. We think it's going to give a much better, more realistic simulation of the scopes in the game. And I think I've kind of mentioned before, but it's not a...
So Northern Trooper, you bring up a good question. Will that be for all Windows? And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that ends up working with Windows and other glass. I think the biggest thing that this points out to me is like getting impacted in terms of like if you're taking hits, if there's explosions nearby you or other effects that are moving you around, it's going to mess with your sight picture. And so you're not just going to be able to shoot through it. You're going to need to take cover, and pick your shots and everything. It's not going to be like in other games where it just always works. It's very, very faked and canned. That's what I see them being able to do with this. Is if there's a whole bunch of explosions and stuff going on near you and throwing you around, you're not going to be able to maintain that proper eye relief in order to get a good sight alignment, sight picture. If you're sniping, and people are doing that, you need to be on it. And I could see this, being that it's all dynamic and constantly working. Yeah, Vastin says that's going to piss off a lot of Call of Duty players. Yep, this is a sim. It is very much a sim, and it's not a hard space sim. It's more in that they are simulating a life in a living, breathing universe, and that includes making it difficult to hit what you're shooting at. It's a thing. Ooh, yeah, will be interesting to see if we get scope cracks, shears on damage. Yeah, because obviously your weapons are going to have wear and tear. If your weapon takes a hit or something like that, or you're too close to an explosion, you're going to take damage on your glass. They already talk about here later on, the EMP will shut down an electronic optic. Yeah, they mentioned wear on attachments. Oh, did they? Cool. Thanks for mentioning that. Tilted turtle. Dust accumulation.
Fake effect, it applies to our scopes no matter where they are. You don't have to be using the scope. You could look down somebody else's scope and see the same thing. It's fully integrated into it, so it's really quite proud of that.
I hope this also applies to when are we going to get some dang binoculars? I want some binoculars.
Next feature I want to talk about, hopefully if any of you have a HDR monitor and you've been playing 320, hopefully you've given a go of the HDR feature. We're really proud of this. It looks really good. And we've got some great feedback from you guys as well. There's been some strong feedback about we want extra black level controls, so we're going to be adding that for you. So make sure you can tweak the image exactly how you want. And there's a great user guide on Spectrum as well if you want to know how to get the best out of it, because it's not always a straightforward tech to get the best out of.
Okay, so I got a question. Has anyone found this user guide for the HDR on Spectrum? If you have, can you link it in chat? Or if you're in my Discord, drop it in the Discord. I would really appreciate it. Because I haven't turned my HDR on with 320 and beyond yet on my monitor, and so I want to give it a try. But I've seen some screenshots that other people have posted, and the whites are really bright. So obviously, I think it needs a little bit of tuning. I don't know if that's on our side or their side. So I really want to be able to play with that and check it out in the near future, because I do have an HDR capable monitor.
Just to give you an insight of how this works, we've got something called unified tone mapping curve, and this is the process where we map the real-life colors of real-life intensities of light onto what your monitor can display. And rather than having an SDR mode and HDR mode, we have like a smooth system where we can blend between SDR and HDR depending on the peak brightness of your monitor. We also pay a lot of attention to make sure we preserve the colors and the hues to keep an accurate image for the artist, and especially for skin tones. We don't want them turning red or white or doing anything bizarre. Just one thing to mention, we've got some content adjustments that will be ongoing. We've got a lot of content in Star Citizen. It takes a little bit of time to make sure we balance everything so it doesn't look too dim or look like a supernova. Next thing I want to mention, temporal upscaling. This has been something that's been asked for a long time, and we're proud to finally get it into your hands. We've got 3 different techniques we're going to be implementing. We've got
Witchbase says, at the moment, in reference to HDR, at the moment it's brutal in daylight dogfights. The glare's horrid with no polarized visors. Just not fun. Yeah, I mean, it can... Oh, sweet. There's the link. Thank you so much. I'm going to steal that. And let me just bookmark. Done. Thank you. Thank you for that, Octavian. Appreciate that. Yeah, the HDR definitely needs some work, especially because like I can only imagine how bright like Microtech is. It was already bright in standard. Looking at it really a lot of the planets when they're fully lit are really brutally bright. And so it definitely is going to require tweaking on their end as well as a little bit of optimization on our end. But I will say that the color it just does definitely look better with HDR on. But there are definitely a lot of scenes where it's a little bit too harsh. But this part is really cool. The temporal upscaling. This is really good to hear.
CIGs, we've got our own temporal super resolution solution called TSR. We've got AMD's Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2, and we've got NVIDIA's DLSS 2 as well. They each have different characteristics and hardware requirements and trade-offs, so it's important to get you all 3 so you could have a choice of what you want to look. On the left here, I've just got a zoom in from one of our outposts. That's no anti-aliasing for people that really love to see jagged edges. The center one is our TSA, which is what you've got in the current release today. And on the right-hand side is TSR without doing upscaling. And this is going to be replacing the TSA solution. And this gives us better quality and more stable image and hopefully much less ghosting.
Nice.
We can use our TSR to do upscaling. Here's the example of how it looks at each resolution. And similar results from AMD's FSR. And some numbers here, which I'm sure you can pour over later. But basically, we can get about 2 times GPU performance if you're interested in using the upscaling technique.
That's pretty impressive.
Obviously, if you're CPU limited, you might not get quite them numbers. It depends on your machine. We also intend to look at frame generation techniques like FSR3 and DLSS3, but these are going to come a bit later. We're going to focus on GPU performance, getting that up first. Frame generation isn't really applicable unless you've got a really good performance first. Some other quick updates. We've got the screen space shadows as added to Alpha 320. It gives us some extra detail in our shadows across characters, and it's particularly on planets. It helps a lot. And we've also got a new texture and mesh streaming engine that helps us get as much possible detail as we can onto your VRAM on your GPU. And it does something we call load balancing. It will scale dynamically for your GPU to make sure we can get the absolute best possible results.
I have been having better performance in 320 and 321 than before, and I wonder if it's due to these things. And it's interesting because I hadn't heard of any of this stuff before. It wasn't in the monthly reports that I noticed or anything, so this is good stuff to hear, and I think it's probably helping with my performance and then also with the smoothness of things.
It's got some more streaming improvements coming in the next release. Just to give you a quick show of what the screen space shadows mean, here we've got a planet with no shadows. I think it's Microtech. The shadow maps, you see the normal shadow maps that fill in half the scene. Good. But then when we get the screen space shadows, you look in the top of the screen or in the flowers, they type of fill in the detail for the rest. They really help type of bed the scene in and stop these things looking and floating.
This next segment is really, really interesting, but also very technical. And it's something Naz and I have already talked about, and we're going to do, be following it very closely because we did a very large segment, Spectrum Pulse, on the Road to 100 Star Systems. And that went into all the tools that they've developed to make planets, to make points of interest, to make to do the spacescaping, everything that goes into just the basis for the star system, that we explore. And so it'll be really interesting to see how this R&D pans out and what we get in the future. Ads. Saying I don't want to continue because I don't know like who subscribes and who's actually listening right now versus who's dealing with the ads. Is it still going? I don't know how long the ads are when they play them on my streams. And I almost exclusively refuse to watch. I watch very few streamers that I don't already subscribe to just because I hate ads with such a fiery passion. Oh, okay, sweet, done. Thank you so much. So, but this part's really important is the future planets. So the virtual terrain track string is really going to help with the CPU savings on the client, especially as you're flying around. And so you'll get a lot better performance. And a lot of what they're doing optimization wise right now is in order to move things off the CPU and onto the GPU, where it can be run much more efficiently. Because Star Citizen right now is still a very CPU bound game. But it will also, this is the big thing, is reducing or if not removing the popping of patches of terrain as you're flying along, especially at certain altitudes, is very obvious. And you saw it in the trailer that they did for the StarEngine. They did 7 ads at once. Oh gosh. Do you guys know if there's a setting I can mess with? I never pay any attention to any of that, so I haven't messed with the settings on how to mitigate the ads or make them a little bit less painful. I apologize that they lump them in like that. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how the R&D goes for this in terms of improving the performance of the terrain rendering.
Next up, I just want to talk about planets for a little bit. It's something I get asked about a lot of what's happening next with planets. So we've got quite a lot of R&D in progress. First thing, we've got 2 new pieces of tech being started recently. First is virtual terrain texturing. It's quite a technical detail, but what this means for you is we're hopefully going to get much less popping or no popping at all. And we're going to achieve this by moving all the calculations to the GPU. And we'll be reusing the same type of patch-based system that Will talked about in his water presentation. And it should give you major CPU savings as well. So we're quite looking forward to getting this in. Another benefit is that it's going to give us the ability to add more complicated logic on, so we can do more diverse and interesting terrain, like things like, we don't have beaches at the moment. We'll be able to achieve that. And there's other similar things where, based on the local conditions, we're able to do more advanced decision making. Next thing we want to look at, which is probably the thing we asked about the most, is our scattering system, which is what's responsible for putting all the trees and the rocks down in the world. We're going to, again, move this to 100% to the GPU, and that should let us have vastly longer draw distances right up until the horizon and much better performance. So we'll finally get rid of the dreaded pop of trees coming in for you. We also have...
So this is essentially part of the StarEngine answer to what UE5 does. And I forget what the term for what UE5 does to make it so that way you don't have that popping in and out of terrain and object scatter. But this is the StarEngine answer to that in order to have that level of performance and smoothness as well. Yeah, nanite. There we go. These 2 things are StarEngine's answer to nanite. In order to have these vast draw distances, but not have popping in and out, which is really important for us flying over a planet at hundreds of kilometers an hour. But integrate with the harvestable resource and fire systems. That part's really interesting.
to integrate it with our harvestable system, the resource system, and the awesome fire system you just saw a minute ago. Another point is it's going to be a hierarchical-based system, which what that means is we'll be able to use nearby vegetation or rocks to influence what other vegetation and rocks can grow or will show up. And this lets us produce much more complicated rule sets, so we can do things like have a tree that maybe underneath it doesn't have any grass, or maybe certain trees come together in clumps, and we'll get a much more natural distribution of vegetation. And final thing we want for planets is we want to be able to build them much easier, much faster, and we want to make sure they are truly unique. At the moment, our planets are unique. However, they are built from type of tile sets, like pre-built things that get mixed and matched together and blended in complicated ways so that you don't see the repetition. But it's not truly unique, not in the same way that the Grand Canyon might be, or the River Nile, or Mount Everest. And that's what we want. So to get that, we need to replicate the complicated natural processes on Earth, like geology, climate, erosion, and these things aren't trivial. So we've got three options. We've got offline tools, Houdini, TerraGen, things like this. We could simulate all these processes in the engine. But we've started some R&D a few months ago on whether we can use machine learning to do some of this. So just to give you a quick idea of how that would work, or how it could work, if you just start with some random input here, it's just like some noise. We run it through a temporary simulation, so we can type of get a more reasonable approximation of simulation at different altitudes and latitudes on Earth. And then what we do is we categorize all this into different biomes. So based on the temperature and moisture, you find out what is a desert, what is a forest. And this part is crucial. So this is the input for our machine learning algorithm. We could come up with this image any other way. You could hand paint it as an artist, or we could just randomize the noise to get a different set of images. And then what we do is we take the large data sets we already have from Earth, from Mars, and from the Moon, and we train it on exactly the same distribution, so biomes, so forests, grasslands, and things like this. And by training it on exactly the type of data we get in reality, we can take this and then push just that, and then we can get these lovely height maps out of it that tell us a really realistic distribution. You can see here, this is a height map, so the black areas are low. You can see all the little rivers and valleys, and this had zero art input aside from this image, which is a very nice result. It's early days. This is based on something called a custom diffusion neural network. It's, like I said, it's pre-trained on Earth data, and it's been built up in patches so that it just doesn't become too expensive to build. And the little circular patches get like added together, and to avoid any seams in the image. And just to help you visualize it, I've just put some colorization on it to show you where like snow and beaches might be, and just wrapped it around a planet to give you a better sense so it doesn't look quite so abstract. Yeah, but this is very early days, this stuff, but we're hopeful this will be helping the future of how we build planets quickly and efficiently.
So it's interesting. The reason they're doing R&D on all this stuff right now is because CIG, is looking to get server meshing, static server meshing in our hands next year. We're in those last few steps right now in the Q4 leading up to server meshing, but it's just static server meshing. And they can really only scale that up so much in order to support more systems before it gets very costly. But once they make that next step into dynamic server meshing, V1 and then especially V2, but V1 is definitely a lot more doable in the near term. Their ability to scale that up to support a lot more star systems and a lot more people goes up exponentially at that point. And so they need, even though their tools for painting planets are really good and they can make planets in a matter of weeks, planets and moons, they need to be able to do it that much faster, as well as free up those people instead of having to paint an entire planet, allowing them to go in and do other things within the planet content to make this stuff work. And get it done and out to us faster. And there's a reason that they're using the data from a moon and then a planet without a real biosphere, as well as Earth, because so many of the planets that we inhabit in game have been terraformed, and so they will have a lot of similarities to Earth in terms of the different the biomes, the temperature, and things that they have, and then they can go in and they can randomize things in order to create rule sets. But then it will generate more realistic terrain. So they can say, okay, there's a very impressive mountain range here. It's super high, super tall, and the system will automatically know based off of how Earth works. Okay, minus a few variables that they can tweak in order to generate what the weather would look like and what that biome would look like. And then in terms of atmosphere, in terms of temperature and rainfall, weather, all that sort of stuff. And then it's a matter of more just creating art, having artists that can create the objects that are scattered on the planet in terms of rocks, trees, plants, all that that goes on there, and creating rule sets for them so that they scatter appropriately and things look realistically. Same thing for the moons. It's really just a matter of making the terrain and temperatures and everything really believable. But allowing a lot of it to be done procedurally with just giving it parameters and telling it, okay, we want this type of planet, and we want it to have these sorts of features, and then just letting it go wild, and you pick the planet that you want and tweak it how you want it to give you the vibe that fits with the lore that they have set for it, if that makes sense.
Thank you. So the last thing I wanted to talk about today is our Gen 12 renderer and Vulkan. This has been ongoing for quite some time, taking a lot longer than we would have liked, but we're finally getting to the end of this long journey. For those who don't know, the reason this was being implemented is largely for performance. We're going to be getting at least 2 times better performance on our CPU submission for rendering, which is often the bottleneck for the game, so that will directly, hopefully, translate to performance improvements. We also get better control of memory with advanced GPU features like resizable bar. And it also opens
2 times faster CPU render submission, which is a lot of the bottleneck when it comes to for the render thread and being able to render a scene. And so with Gen 12, we already removed the bottleneck on the GPU side, which a part of the bottleneck. So as Vulkan gets integrated, we should start to see even more performance improvements. It's going to be really great.
Opens the door for some things like ray tracing and new mesh shaders. So we've got a video of a Vulkan running, it's live captured. So I can't remember which ship is this, but it's it's all working fine now. There's a couple of hitches in performance, so we can't quite release it yet, but we're looking into them, the last few performance issues and stability issues, and hopefully we'll be releasing it soon. So, like I said, one of the things we really were interested in by implementing
hopefully releasing it soon. From what Sylvan told me and other people, they have some more bug fixing to do, but they're pushing really hard to try and get it out to us in Q4. Hopefully they'll make it, but if not, it will be right around the corner. But they're just they're in the getting towards the end. Vulkan, the Gen 12 render, and then Vulkan are 2 really big things that they have to have in the main branch. Both not just for Star Citizen, but more importantly for Squadron 2 release. Q4 of this year is what they're shooting for. And that's what Sylvan told me. I had about a 30-minute conversation with Benoit. I talked with Sylvan for about 10 minutes. I talked to the UI team for probably 30+ minutes at CitizenCon. So got a lot of good information. It was really good to chat with them. But yeah, the Vulkan renderer is huge for Squadron 42 for performance reasons and optimization, but then also they want to get ray tracing and global illumination into Squadron 42 before it releases. So that's why they have that the prototype with it working right now, so they can start testing that prototype in game with Squadron 42 already. It doesn't have to be released yet. They can start testing it in game already to start finding the ways they need to tweak it and adjust it before they even finish the full implementation. That's why it's so important for them to get that prototype of global illumination already out and in testing within the dev branch.
Vulkan was to get support for new hardware features, and one of the big ones was ray tracing. So with that, I want to hand you over to Ben, who's going to talk about some of our lighting research.
Hi, I'm Ben Parry, and this is Global Illumination.
So we still got about 60 people hanging out and chat and viewing. I know not all of you follow me. If you would take the time to give me a follow, I would really appreciate it. It just helps with the algorithm, helps people find the channel and get gets the information out there. You don't always have to come watch me. I'd love for you to come hang out with myself and Naz and the Armchair Admirals and Generals crew. But if you could grace me with a follow, I would really appreciate it. And just remember, anytime you come in and hang out and you suffer through the ads or you decide to maybe want to subscribe, all that money goes to stackup.org, 100%, and then some, because I donate some as well. But this part is really cool. Oh God, it looks good.
So, as Ali just said, moving over to the Vulkan renderer, and now that that's fully online, we've got access to hardware ray tracing on the GPUs that have support for it. And the best thing to do with hardware ray tracing would be to create a new updated global illumination system for us to use. Now I'm here to give you a fairly early preview of the work that we've done so far, but first off I'm just going to simplify some things and ask, what is global illumination? Well, you can break the lighting in a game down to 3 components. First off, you've got direct lighting. That's not global illumination, but that's the sun lights in the level, that kind of thing. Next up, you've got diffuse global illumination. Now that's like a whole hemisphere, like a soft lighting that takes from the entire scene and lights up the pixel. And then finally, you've got glossy GI and reflections. That's like your shiny surface glints, your mirror reflections, that kind of thing. And now all of those combine together to form one glorious penguin. Now, now for the rest of this presentation, we're specifically talking about this guy, the diffuse penguin. Glossy GI has actually been disabled in all the videos. Even the old system videos don't show the glossy GI here, just to aid the comparison. First off, we've got a video from Chris Campbell, who's going to make us look cool.
All right, let's make this big. I think the clips from the Carrack really don't do, or at least not all of them, do this justice. But I think it's the paying attention to the areas that are very dark in the old system and looking at how much lighter they are later, to showing the refraction of light as it should appropriately. That one was really dramatic. No, and Socially Confused makes a really good point. It would be nice to see all the details. That's the thing, is with so many of the scenes, unless they are brightly lit, you do lose a lot of the detail, and you don't appreciate the amount of detail and level of detail and work that has gone into making so many of these assets, because it gets hidden and muted so much because the lighting is not it's not what they need it to be in order to show it off, especially in a space game where a lot of times you're out in the black. And being able to have the light accurately reflecting off surfaces to light other areas of the scene will go so far into making things look so much better. And it'll also help a lot with the gameplay. Just being able to move around an environment and see what you're doing and see what you're bumping into and what you need to interact with is going to look so. It's going to make a big deal, or make a big difference for when we're playing the game. So you're not having to turn up the brightness in order to see what's going on in a darker scene, or at least not as much. The other thing that I don't think many people have pointed out, but it was one of the first things I was talking about with the guys that I was hanging out with, is the lighting team has a budget, and they can only put so many sources of light in an area for performance reasons, because that will hamper the performance of the game, and they can only put so many different light sources to fake those reflections in order to make it look better, to highlight things. Well, this is going to address that. And this will have a performance cost, but not to the, it won't be the performance cost that if they had done all that manually, which is just nuts. And this, that performance cost is mitigated by the by having Vulkan. The other thing is a lot of the ships have very poor headlights, lamp lights. They're going to be far more effective with global illumination functioning in terms of lighting up an area, lighting up a scene. And your headlamp is also going to do a much better job of lighting up dark areas like it really would in real life, as well as the undermount flashlight on your weapons.
So next up, the boring or the interesting bit. How are we doing it? How does the tech work? I'm just going to dig into that just a little bit. So we're closely based on AMD's recent paper, GI 1.0. We're probably going to build on top of that, but at the moment we're quite close to it. We ray trace against a simplified world so that we get smoother lighting since it's a diffuse scene, we want a sort of diffuse, smooth signal. This also means that we get more rays per millisecond, which is always good. And we do generate a lot of probes. So the new system is generating, well, for comparison, the old probe was about 1 probe per room, and the new system is about 25,000 probes that are all on screen at the same time. And we're going to see that now. So here's a scene that I've dramatized a little bit just to give trouble to the old lighting system. And this is what the ray tracing sees. So it's a simplified single color per object kind of thing. But then we've also got this kind of a 3D dictionary of average light values, so that the light is kind of shared over things in a similar area. So going back to the scene, this is the old system. So you'd render a single image from the center of the room, blur it, and then slap it onto the entire scene. Now, as you can see, the middle of the scene is about the right lighting, but everything else has got the middle of the scene's lighting. Like these red lights at the sides, they're basically drowned out by the table bounce that somehow made it across the room to them. So we want to replace that system with 25,000 probes, each one of them only providing light to a small area around themselves. And then we interpolate that to provide a smooth bounce. And you can see already in the distance, the red light is really bouncing up there. And then we add a screen space occlusion pass just to tidy up the edges on things. And there is the final composite.
It looks so good.
So, what else does it do?
Good.
Well, because it's real-time generation, it means we can do a real-time bounce, and we can do that with quite small areas. You can get a really vibrant bounce that picks up off small objects in the scene. Ooh. And that means that the art team can really lean into strong local variation on color. As again, we will see. So we'll do a side-by-side comparison on this one. As you can already see, like the spotlight's really like throwing stuff into the scene. This is just one light in the room. And we did have live updating, as you can see in the old system, but it was designed for like time of day changes rather than this continuous smooth view. And finally, it means that we can do things like glowing surfaces can just illuminate the world without having to add special lights to fake it.
This next scene, this next demonstration is really cool and really helps to show how powerful this is. But yeah, Macton just made a really good point, and I know they have mentioned it in Paul's Discord, but he says that I'm really glad they're doing software global illumination instead of dual systems, because yeah, they talk about how if they had to maintain the old system and the new system, it would be just an absolute nightmare for the lighting team. And so replacing it with a software-based system is really going to help with their workflow and make it so that way it's not as time-consuming for them to do. Is this a video? Not quite there yet, I don't think.
So yeah, there's two really common cases in Star Citizen particularly that this is going to help with. First off, cockpit brightness. We capture at the moment the at the moment, we capture that cockpit probe in a setup scene, and then we don't update it as you're flying around. So you're not going to get the sky color in, and you're not going to get the ground color in. And then we've got the opposite problem that I don't have a picture for this, but cargo bays, sometimes they're light, you land somewhere dark, you open up the doors, and now you've just got this weird little light room with nothing spilling out of it. So again, let's have a video.
I'm going to put this on the big screen. So as you can see, you're not getting accurate reflections to light up. This is all in very dark shadow. And so it's not really accurately modeling how light would actually reflect in the environment.
Oh yeah, so this is the old system. The sun's working, but you can see there's no sky, there's no ground lighting. By the way, I've turned off a lot of the cockpit lights so that you can see this. And then in the new one, you can already see the skylight is kind of helping a little. But then as you turn over, you get all the ground lighting.
Really, really cool. Really great how they did that.
And yet there's more. See, one of the concerns we had was that we didn't want to create a two-tier system. If people have got hardware ray tracing and it's working for them, that's great. But you can't really have the art team optimizing Wasim for one type of lighting and then having to optimize it for another type of lighting and having to trade off decisions about the two of them. So what we've been experimenting with is trying to create a new low bar that's higher than the old low bar, as well as creating a new high bar.
You get global illumination and you get global illumination. Everybody gets global illumination. Yay!
And the idea for this is basically to take that single room environment probe system that we have been using, update it so that we can do live relighting on that, and then to sort of slot that in where the ray tracing would be while still keeping all of the other stuff, like the 25,000 probes and all that kind of stuff, can look at the old system and we kind of Frankenstein them together. So I'll show you what we've got so far for this. So this is just the old one and the new one so that you can see the problems. I'm
going to put this big again just because this looks so cool.
It's overly lit, let's be honest. And now this is what Star Citizen would have looked like if we released it on the PS1. The sharp-eyed among you may have noticed also the ship is missing, but we can't do dynamic objects in this. You'll be surprised. It doesn't seem to mind. And there we have software GI in the middle, which is, like I say, it was using the same 25,000 probe system, but not having to use any kind of hardware ray tracing. As you can see, it's not a perfect match. It's not identical, but it's a lot more dynamic than the old system. And finally,
It's definitely much closer match to actual global illumination than the old screen space probes. Pico!
And finally, I'm just going to show you a to-do list here. I don't have pictures because it's stuff we've not done. Glossy reflections. Obviously, we want to complete the picture, and for that, we need to handle glossy reflections. That's self-explanatory, really. I don't know what to say about that. Secondly, you've only seen it on opaque surfaces so far. The next step is to extend this so that it can support glass and water and all the other transparent things in the game. And beyond that, we've obviously got fog, we've got other atmospherics. We want to expand GI to make sure that it affects everything smoothly and equally. And the final thing is a Star Citizen thing. We've got giant scenes, we've got a ridiculous scale on some things, and we've got plans to make sure that this GI extends to handle that full scale. Anyway.
It'll be really interesting to see how well the global illumination works in what they showed us at the beginning with the clouds, fog, and weather. Because this already looked amazing to me, but with global illumination, especially like down at surface level or with light reflecting off of our ships flying through these environments, it can take it even farther beyond the next level that we were looking at.
That's all I've got to tell you now. I've been Ben Parry. Next up, we've got Star Clock with Chris Rain.
The second half of the presentation is really all about physics and the physics engine that they,
Hello, everyone.
Right here.
Hi.
And the physics is important.
I am Chris Rain, and I would like to show you not one, not two, but 3 new physics of our physics engine. And I would like to start off by introducing Star Cloth, our new character cloth simulation with a short video.
I like how he's
So
wearing
this
the
is
dad
just regular
sneakers.
player movement. That was actually me playing. You can see the cloth collides with the ground.
When do we get our New Balance in game?
You can see multiple layers of cloth that do not interpenetrate. Cloth gets influenced from wind and has accurate collisions with the player's body. We now have support for collisions from dynamic objects. You can play football in any outfit.
And look at these house shoes. Like what I'm wearing right now. When do I get comfy slippers in game for when I'm walking around my ship in the morning, drinking my coffee fresh out of the coffee machine? When, CIG? I'm a space dad. I need these comforts.
StarCloth supports the full range of motion a human can make, from fast movement to extreme poses. StarCloth is designed to be a first-class member of our physics engine. It interacts with everything we have to offer, from character movement over forces like wind, thruster backwash, explosion, to projectile impacts and collisions. It's efficient. It always updates at 120 FPS, regardless of the frame rate, and is hand-optimized. It's immersive and believable. It's a realistic simulation based on physical properties. It's high fidelity, high quality. We want to raise the bar with this. The visual geometry you see on the right is complex and not suitable for simulation. The visual geometry is made with visual quality in mind, and that does not translate well to simulation. So we decided to add the ability to use bespoke meshes that are made to simulate well and let their movement then deform the visual geometry. This allows us to share the same sim setup across multiple visual meshes, which is a huge productivity boost for tech art. We can seamlessly blend the simulation on and off, so we can disable the simulation at a distance.
I think the part about let's see, go back to that right here. Same simulation setup can be shared across different visual geometries. A huge productivity boost for tech art. So this means that the tech art team won't have to go in and manually set up different geometries for different clothing items before they make it in the game in order for them to behave appropriately. It's same simulation setup, and then they're basically just able to skin it up and add things onto it to make the clothing item, and it all just works. It's very smart.
Off, so we can disable the simulation at a distance. Back to the football. Everything that is dynamically simulated is able to interact with the cloth, from ships, over crates, boxes, and even footballs. We ensured that the collisions are accurate and believable. As you can see in the image, the football parts both layers of the gown. The cloth itself supports self-collisions, which means it will create folds and wrinkles, but not interpenetrate itself or other layers of cloth. The same applies to the static environment as well. The cloth will drape itself around the environment, so brushing up against objects will result in the behavior you expect. We added tapered capsules to improve collision detection.
For everybody who came over from Paul's stream and watches the Astropub, Astro Historian, office hours and all that stuff, the way he said capsules, all I could think about was Paul doing this. Capsule. It's a capsule. It's just, that's where my mind went.
Accuracy. A tapered capsule is a capsule which has two different radii at the endpoints. Human anatomy is complex, and we need to accurately represent it for collisions. The traditional capsules we use on our ragdolls lead to jumps in the collision surface. Now, notice how there is a jump between the elbow and the lower arm, and another jump where the forearm connects to the hands. These jumps pose significant problems for our cloth simulation. If you look at the upper torso, you can see the collision proxies are actually completely hiding the cloth, and they're essentially completely useless. So,
I wonder if this is going to affect your hitbox. And if things hit you or not, by actually more accurately reflecting the size of the character in first person combat.
Now notice the difference on the same body represented with tapered capsules. We can now faithfully represent the hips, legs, and arms of the character. An additional benefit of tapered capsules is that the collision detection is significantly faster than with regular capsules. Currently,
Bingo.
we're only using them for cloth collision.
And Walker 300, I think that is probably why they have waited. They knew that they were working on this stuff, and they didn't want to have to go back and rework dresses and, flipping capes, too many overcoats. We have them, but they're very limited. And I think they realized how much work it was in order to, make the collision geometry for those clothing items. And so like, okay, we're not going to make more of those, and they're going to do them now that they have this coming in.
Collision detection, but in the end, we'd like to use them for everything. We simulate the cloth always at 120 FPS or 120 Hertz, regardless at which update rate the game is running at. We do this to be faithfully able to detect collisions with a fast-moving character. As we're simulating at a higher rate than the game updates, we have to interpolate the joint positions between updates we get from the game. At each simulation step, we perform collision detection, simulation, and update the cloth's sim cage. Now, if the game is running at 120 FPS, we do one update for the cloth simulation. If the game updates at 60 FPS, like in the image, we simulate the cloth twice. Now, if the game runs slower, like at 30 FPS, we need to update the cloth 4 times. You can see this in the image. It becomes apparent that we need to make the cloth run as fast as possible, and we spent a great deal of amount of time optimizing this with various techniques, including handwritten vectorization and using every trick in the optimization handbook. The effort pays off because we can faithfully capture very complex movement and fast-moving characters, even at low frame rates, without any clipping or tunneling.
Yeah, so that's why they did this, is so that way, for people with slower machines, it will still look good, but the actual simulation, the cloth simulation, doesn't impact the game's performance all that much. It's that they said at the beginning, it's very efficient for them to run it, but they wanted to make it so that way it didn't scale down when your performance scaled down. And so if you have if you're running the game on a proverbial potato, it will still look good. It won't update at 30 FPS, when the game updates at 30 FPS. So that way you won't have this clipping and weird, sudden movements in the cloth from one position to another.
Thank you. One area that poses a significant challenge for character cloth is when multiple pieces of garments layer on top of each other, like a tight-fitting jacket that lies on top of the pants, as you can see in the image above. This is a very difficult region to simulate properly because you don't have much space and the simulation collisions have to be absolutely accurate. This, what I'm going to show you, is a very subtle effect, but once you notice it, you cannot stop noticing it. I want to focus your attention to the waist region of the character. Here we tweak the simulation settings in real time to see the effect. Here you see a rendering with a high-fidelity cloth disabled. And here the same scene with it enabled. To be continued, tomorrow much more can be seen about StarCloth in the character advancement panel. Be sure not to miss out. Thank you. So, next up, Star Hair. Currently, we have the ability to simulate the effect of moving hair with joints that are essentially simulated pendulums. The hair is skinned to these joints, and when these joints move due to the pendulum simulation, the hair moves with it. This leads to a fast and believable movement of hair. However, the quality is directly correlated to the quality of the skinning, which is tedious for tech art to achieve for some complex hairstyles. Further, apart from gravity, the pendulum joint.
Yeah, the devil is really in the details, and a lot of people won't notice these things. A lot of people will, and like a lot of people have said, this was a tech demo, and a lot of the people who are watching things like tech demos are the people who could potentially be using this engine or using aspects of the engine in the future. And everybody's like, "Oh, well, it has a long ways to go." It's like, yeah, it has a long ways to go, for the engine to be more feature complete, but they're also a long way. They've covered a lot of ground. They're closer to the end than they are at the beginning, that's for sure. So will they license this engine to someone else to use, in the next year or two? No. But they do want to show their work out there and show what they're working for, so that way people will start to consider it. And people notice these little details, especially professional, people who review games for a living. They notice these things, and they pay attention to them, and that's what will get you good reviews. And those good reviews will get you on people's on gamers' radar, not the website, but the radar for individual gamers, and that's what will continue to help drive sales as well. Plus, they just want it to look good. They want it to feel real. They want it to make it a sim. So they're simulating cloth. They're simulating air. They're simulating water and fire because they want it to be a living, breathing simulation.
Do not react to external forces like collisions or wind or explosions. So we asked ourselves, can we somehow improve upon this? And I'd like to show you some early prototype results of our research. This is an image of the raw geometry you saw in the previous image. You can see many strands of hair, and we thought to ourselves, maybe we can simulate all of these strands. This is a single strand isolated from the rest. As these are simple triangle meshes, we initially thought we could simply use our cloth simulation and simulate such a strand like a sheet of cloth. That didn't work out at all. It turns out hair does not behave like clothing. Also, the sheer number of strands and their individual triangles and vertices are simply too much to simulate efficiently, even for our highly optimized cloth engines. We realized then that our artists are actually using splines to create these strands. And a spline is a smooth curve or line through space. You could see that in yellow. And we thought maybe we can just simulate these. They're much simpler. And hair simulations need to be able to maintain the original hairstyle. You cannot have the hair simulation change the visual appearance of a character. One of the reasons why using the cloth simulation for hair did not work out at all is that the cloth only simulates vertices, and they have no concept of orientation. So you do not know how the next segment has bent in relation to your current segment. In other words, you cannot easily simulate twist with vertices alone. For splines, however, that is very easy to do. So all of this together allows us to simulate the strands according to the theory of Courseratte rods. A Courseratte rod allows you to model the behavior of slender one-dimensional rods, exactly what our splines are, and simulate bend, twist, stretch, and shear, exactly what we need. Hair also needs exact collision detection to not intersect with the head, the ears, the cheeks, the jaw region. The video I'm about.
So all this makes me wonder, and it goes back to a joke that one of the other flight medics I fly with in the Army made. He said, "You're not a real flight medic unless you do a hair flip after you take off your flight helmet." And we've seen the animation for putting the helmet on, taking the helmet off. You know, that they made this really cool animation for it. They want it to look cool when you're taking off and putting on your flight helmet. But if I have hair like this, are they going to give? I want the animation team to make it so that way, if you have hair, you can do a hair flip. You know, and be able to take off your helmet, press the emote whatever button, and then do a hair flip, you know, afterwards. Because I can't do that in real life, obviously, but it'd be really cool if we could do a hair flip or something similar like that in game with our character. You know, I've always wanted to run my fingers through my hair. I haven't been able to do that for almost 20 years. You know, longer than that. Yeah, Danger Hobo, he has long enough hair that he can do a little. It's just a little bit of a hair flip. It's not a lot, but he does have a little bit of a hair flip. Obviously, I'm not flipping anything, and obviously, I don't normally have this when I go fly. But you know, in between training flights and drill weekends, I grow it out a little bit. But obviously not for Squadron 42. Well, for Squadron 42, but like in Star Citizen, yeah, your hair could be loose. You know, take it off, let the hair fall down, and then do a flip. I want it. Make it a thing.
To show you is some very early prototype footage of how such a simulation actually looks like. So this is a test of various head movements to see how the hair reacts. Hair simulation is one of the hardest things to simulate, especially in a real-time context, and very tricky to get right. We're actually simulating all the hair strands. So we will have characters being able to run their hands through their hair and have the hair react realistically.
See? That's what we need.
A barber simulation next.
Now, obviously, this can look a little bit better, but this is just in the editor. This is just showing their ability to simulate the hair strands. You know,
actually,
they'll work
being a
on it to
bald
make it
man,
look
this was a very touching moment for me when I made this video. Thank you. Thank you.
Need in-game hairspray. Now, the one thing that CIG doesn't need to do, and I am married, so this is why, you know, once you are married to a woman or live with a woman, you realize that it's like worse than cats. You end up getting hair, or long-haired dogs. You get hair everywhere. If I find a rat's nest in the shower of my ship, or like there's clumps of hair on the floor of my Idris, nope, I'll lose it. I'm not going to hire a janitor. I don't want the janitor behavior to be have to clean up hair. The hair needs to stick on the head. It doesn't need to be simulated that it falls out and makes a mess. Macton said can definitely tell they had the one hair ready for this demo and the orchestra conductor. Well, the question is, with the hair demo plus what they showed us off with the new hairstyles that are coming in 322 and Q4. I do need a few janitors on the Idris. I don't want to ever see a janitor pulling a rat's nest out of a shower, though, because that's disgusting, and it drives me nuts that my wife doesn't do it. She's not here. She's asleep.
Next, I would like to introduce Maelstrom, our physically based destruction system.
This is so good.
And
oh, yeah.
I would like to do that with a video that I believe speaks for itself.
Wait. Let's back up a little bit. We'll make this big. Yeah, Witch Space, it does leave a lot of unanswered questions. But I think we'll get those questions answered before we ever see it in the PU. I think what they're showing us is like, hey, this is what you're going to see in Squadron. And obviously they're going to have to import it and implement in the PU, but we do need to figure out what the limitations of it are and how, because we can guess, but they obviously haven't told us what this means for the persistent universe. And that changes a lot of things. Like, did some artists, a whole team of artists go through and make this really nice derelict outpost or settle, abandoned settlement or something like that, only for us to just destroy it in a day and it's gone. Like, so let's watch this real quick. It just looks so cool.
And I would like to do that with a video that I believe speaks for itself.
That was great.
See the water
God, it
splashes?
looks cool. Love seeing the debris splash into the water, seeing it all working together. Yeah, bombing outposts is going to be impressive. Bombing anything would be impressive. Especially like if they can take this to the next level and allow for some at least temporary terrain deformation. A crater shows up and stuff gets thrown all over the place.
We want players' intuitive prediction of the effect a weapon or a collision has to actually happen in the engine or in the game. So we decided to move away from hit point pools or other abstract models to simulate damage, but rather have damage be calculated from a physical model and from the physical material properties of each entity. If something breaks off due to its structural integrity decreasing below a certain threshold, Maelstrom allows it to break off in a realistic fashion. If you shoot off a wing, the missiles and weapons on that wing should still remain attached. If the broken off part still has power, electric items should still function. This means Maelstrom was needed to be designed to work with a hierarchical setup to begin with. From the hierarchical representation of the geometry we want to break off to the same hierarchy on a higher level for items like power plants, lights, weapon systems, and so on. Maelstrom is persistence and networking ready. We designed it from the ground up to work with high latency situations, to persist and replicate easily.
This is very, very, very smart. The way that they designed this in order to be PS ready, network ready, and yeah, they built it, not only to have Squadron look cool, but also they built this with the PU in mind. I think my question is, how much work do the artists have to do in order to make assets ready for this? How does that end up working? How much proceduralization goes into being able to convert an asset for it? Whether it's an outpost wall or a trash can or a tree, because this is not just for what you saw, man-made things, obviously, but this is if you crash your Nova tank into a cactus on Hurston or a pine tree on Microtech, that's what this is meant to do eventually. So how much work goes into that? Like, obviously this looks complicated, but tell us what that art process looks, because they say easy and artist-friendly setup. Okay, but what does that mean going forward? For the assets that we have now, the assets that we'll have going forward, how much work is needed in order to integrate this into every aspect of the universe that they plan for it to be integrated in.
Uniquely identify it within the universe. So your Gladius wing is your Gladius wing. We added physical material and damage properties that can now be replicated across the network. One of them, and that's the most important one, we call integrity. And this
is the physicalized damage system. This is what will make armor a thing. This is how armor is going to work. Because they can take individual pieces, art pieces in the game, especially, and have it look like, hey, this looks like armor, and they can actually change the properties for it, and it will be armor, and it will, make it armor. But this is also this is another one of those one ring systems that Paul likes to talk about, myself and Nazareth as well, in that by giving things physical properties, it will also affect the repair, the repair values and materials. They can tie all this into it.
Determines how much structural or internal integrity a physical geometry has. Integrity is modified from dissipating, or rather absorbing, energy from kinetic impacts or energy weapons, and also in the future from absorbing energy from external factors like extreme temperature or fire, as you've seen before.
Yeah, Wheeled Rider, that's what I want to know is what goes into this, because they, back here, it's a artist friendly setup and everything. How much work goes into going back and making this work, or is some of this work already done? Was some of this work already done at some point? That we do need more those questions answered. Bloodtide Gaming 07, thanks for joining us this evening. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, because if it's an absolute nightmare where they have to go back, as like back here at the beginning, let's see, they talked about how many millions of different items or assets or whatever they have in the game. If it was super complex, it wouldn't be feasible. So it has to be feasible for them to do it. We just don't know what that process is for it to be a feasible undertaking for the artists and tech artists.
We also track which physical part or geometry belongs to which visual geometry and which high-level entity. So if the structural or internal integrity collapses, we know which visual geometry is affected and which item might be affected as well. So a power plant will cease to emit power or implode, explode. A weapon will cease to fire, and so on. To make things break apart, we create what we call breakable clusters. A breakable cluster is a set of physical geometry, the visual geometry, and the entities on top that can break off. Between breakable clusters,
I also think that this is the solution that they use for structural salvage or hole munching. Because they talked about how this was network ready and works for even low latency situations, and PES and replication ready. So I think that this is probably how they go about making that a thing.
Clusters, we create abstract cantilever beams to be able to model stress and strain. I'll go into more detail in that in a bit. Breakable clusters are hierarchical. They mirror the hierarchy of all attached entities involved. They also embed the hierarchy of all animated joints. And they also embed the hierarchy of all physical geometries. They essentially represent a ground truth of the entire hierarchy necessary to perform all our goals for Maelstrom. This image is showing a breakable cluster graph of the gladius. I'd like to show one more video of Maelstrom before we continue. I'd like to show one more video of
Wheeled Rider. If it was a nightmare, I don't think they'd be doing it. I don't think they would undertake the system if it was a nightmare for them to convert everything.
Maelstrom before we continue.
With everything they've done before, though, they've had plans and tools in order to make the process not we have to go back through each individual thing and do it. It's not a nightmare where, okay, well, we've got 10 people and they have to go through 10 million items in order to bring everything up to speed, and then we have to, there's no way that they would undertake that. And there's nothing that they have done that was ever that level of work. Let's see, back to the normal screen. Oops. Yeah, and I think it's probably, it didn't explode on impact just because, they probably had it turned off in order for it to not do that, so you can see things breaking apart. The other thing is this is part of the system that will allow for things to not just spontaneously go boom. That's the whole point, is that you don't spontaneously go boom unless you have a catastrophic failure of something like a power plant, or something, gets below, something explosive takes an impact. So it is a much more realistic system. But at the same time, we'll still see big bada booms, when you hit the wrong thing and you cause, especially a cascade of failures, which will lead to your power plant just overloading. That sort of thing's still going to happen. Big explosions, big ordnance,
We needed to find a good way to easily and efficiently determine when a breakable cluster breaks. We chose a well-established model from material sciences and structural engineering, cantilever beams. In essence, a cantilever is a structural member that has a fixed support and a free end.
Yeah, they'll make it however they end up doing it, it'll be a systematic system, some sort of tool or procedural thing, or things are made in such ways with the hierarchical with the cluster system and the hierarchy systems, that a lot of it will be, I'm going to change the properties for this, and it'll affect all of these other things that are in the same family. And this is really interesting because it's just another example of them, using real life things in order to, they built a simulation to model something in real life. They didn't just create a system to fake it. Big flashing anti-collision lights. We don't have the lighting budget for that yet.
Forces experienced on the free end can be used to calculate the amount of stress the fixed support is enduring. The basic ideas behind that are best explained from a very simple example. If a ship were to collide with the horizontal part of the crane in the image, far from the vertical part, the fixed support would endure a higher stress as if the ship were to collide closer to the vertical part. But not only does the point of impact determine how much stress the cantilever beam experiences, also how large the surface area is connecting the cantilever and the fixed support has a large influence on when a cantilever beam will break. In our case, this actually means we analyze the cross-section of the intersection of the set of geometry from two breakable clusters to calculate the surface area. A wing attached to the body has a rather large connecting surface area compared to the surface area calculated for the stabilizers connected to the body. We then project forces from impacts and explosions onto these cantilever beams and calculate the stress the beams experience. Over time, this stress turns into strain, and if we reach a certain threshold, the beam snaps. The result, simple, efficient, and deterministic breakability. But this is not just about ships and buildings that you saw in the videos before. We want Maelstrom to be a systemic system that we can use on all types of entities. So here's some...
Which space, that's actually a really good point. Think of all the wild experiments that players can undertake within the game once this is all in and functioning, just to see, okay, when does it break? When does it fail? I mean, there's how many crates do you put on like a wing of a wing of a ship until it snaps off or something? Just the physics experiments, just for grins, will just be absolutely nuts to watch. Yeah, let's knock down the Hurston Tower. Down with Hurstons. I foresee a potential joint marketing event with Stack Up. I wish.
Video of some test footage.
Ooh. Here. Another video.
Of AI shooting each other behind breakable cover and Maelstrom barrels.
It all looks really good. And oh my God, my dog is sleeping over there and he just shit himself and it stinks. Yeah, it's whack that this is all modeled with hard science. The math involved is nuts. Hooray for big, powerful computers doing all these physics calculations. And but I love the explanation of all these properties. Because players will be able to take advantage of these things and use them to their own ends. It's going to be really fun to watch. Okay.
Physical material properties influence damage and breaking and have a direct influence to how things break and fracture. To achieve this, we added various properties: density, yield strength, resilience, thickness, toughness, Young's modulus. And this is more or less what I wanted to talk about Maelstrom, but I don't want to leave without showing one more video of what carnage Maelstrom can create.
It's so cool. It's so cool. Oh
So-
my god.
So thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Benoit.
Great. Thank you. All right. I am not this person, but I'm filling in with him. So far, I mean, you guys think this is going to change your game up to now? All these new features? Hell yeah. Okay. So we've seen updates from fire, water, we've just seen force, we've seen sun and light. So the next thing that's left to build a ludicrous space game is audio. And so I'll leave you with Graham, who's going to show you some of the new audio enhancements we bring to StarEngine to make it even more realistic than it is now.
Hi CitizenCon, Graham.
So this is just in addition to, this is adding to the sound simulation that they are already building. But I really like this. I know a lot of people are like, oh, there's no sound in space. And it's like, okay, yes, but they are closer to, by giving you the option for having that versus what we have right now, it's closer to real than, than otherwise, but it still gives you some feedback. And I really like the way they show this off in the FPS environment. So let's take a look. And I'm just going to make it big.
I'm here. Good to see you. Recently in the audio team, we've been looking at how we can create a greater psychological connection and emotional impact within our games through the use of improved audio technology. Audio can play a crucial role in the immersion of the player. And with that in mind, the audio code and technical sound design teams have been looking at all of our tech from the ground up. For example, when you're under threat, you should feel a real sense of danger. When you're armed, you should feel the dangerous power that you hold within your hands. Earlier this year, we showed you our resonance tech, which allows us to bring the action much closer to the player even when they're deep in the bowels of a ship and far away from where all the hits and the explosions are happening. But that's just one part of a much larger push to create a better, more immersive audio experience. With that in mind, let's take a look at some of the tech we've been working on. First, let's listen to some of our weapon sounds in action. They're a great simulation, but we wanted to take them further and express the sound pressure, the forces being exerted. Our new in-house audio effects, particularly the multiband compressor, tuned by our sound designers, give us this result. The compression serves to illustrate the power of the weapons and the effect that they have when going beyond the limits of the listener.
Definitely notice a big
Let's show you the
difference in
same
my
audio
headphones.
effects applied to the ship weapons, taking us from this to this. But it's not just about feeling powerful. Changes in audio can create a sense of danger, of being out on your own and under threat. Here's an example of ship combat. Sounds good, but what if we wanted a little more realism?
I love it. I love the realism mode. I think it's cool as hell. Is it 100% realistic? No, it's more realistic, and I think that's great. It's very cinematic.
The audio
They've
propagation
definitely
tech
just
that we've been rolling out makes it easier to change the soundscape in real time, and a nice use of that technology is to provide a more realistic option. Here, your own weapons resonate through the hull of the ship. Only what's in the pressurized cockpit is heard clearly, and the threat level feels higher due to the isolating lack of enemy weapon and ship audio.
Yeah, it's far more sim.
Making
than
these changes
other
creates space
IPs
in
and
the
other
audio,
games.
both spectrally and temporally, making impacts seem bigger, more damaging, more of a problem for the player. This realistic mode isn't limited to the flight experience, it's applied
is good.
appropriately
I
to the
love
game
this.
as a whole. Here's an FPS battle in a depressurized area. With realistic mode, we get that sense of isolation again, giving the location a different colour and adding variety to the audio experience. Player breathing and foley are exaggerated, and other sounds are transmitted through physical contact. That's all from us for now. We look forward to getting these new audio features into your hands.
Yeah, I love that realistic mode, especially
All
for
right.
the environments
Hello,
with no
everyone.
atmosphere. So obviously this last segment with the PS replication layer server meshing with Paul Reindel, this is absolutely incredible, and I'll be adding a little bit more context as we go through here, just because I did get to speak with Benoit for about 30 minutes when I met him on day one. No, it was the morning of day two. I don't in the Pyro demo, I don't recall, honestly, but I don't know if the planet that I was on and fighting on had atmosphere, or if there's a setting, where you change that. So I didn't get to play around with it, and I didn't see it. I don't think it will become the only option, but we'll see.
So, persistent entity streaming, replication layer and beyond. My name is Paul Reindel. I'm Director for Online Technology. And I'm going to show you a little bit insight in our technology for persistent entity streaming and the replication layer. I thought about what's the best way to show you something about that tech. And I thought about putting some technical drawings on the slides, or maybe show video like we did 2 years ago. But really, the best way to show you how persistent entity streaming works is to give you a live demonstration. And that's what I'm going to do. All right. So this will all be live, so please bear with me if there's any glitches. So let's keep this rolling. I think I'm supposed to press the button. No, it's already switched. Before we start, a little bit, I just give you a little bit an overview what you see here. Let me set up everything.
This does a really good job of demonstrating why the replication layer is such a genius idea, because no other game that has mesh servers does it this way.
One moment, sorry. So on this left side, you will see my client window. And on the bottom side, you will see the server renderer. So for this demonstration, and I start a second client, I'm just stopping that.
It is black magic. Many sacrifices were made.
This is live, all right. So again,
doing
on
it
this
live.
side, you see the client. And he just logged out because I started a second client. So let's do this again. One more time. On this side, you see the server renderer, which is currently, it has nothing streamed in. I'm showing a small demonstration level. And on this side, you see the entity graph, which is our online database. That's powering what you see in persistent entity streaming, what you play since 3.18. And I also have some metrics on the screen, which shows the entity graph worker, the requests per minute, per second, the mutations, and you also will see entities created and destroyed once I do that. All right, so let's wait for my client to come up and join this level. So the first thing that will happen when I join this level, you will see on that server, everything streams in, and my client gets connected and also streams in everything on the client view. What would happen on the behind the scenes is that my player just got unstowed into that chart, and we at real time created everything for this player. So you will see his body is attached to the player. You will see his Mobi glass, his head with all his customizations, his undersuit, and then all his customizations as well on the undersuit. What you also see is that this player just got unstowed and attached to a static zone object container. And this is how our zone system works. Basically, on the server, you will see 3 different zones, purple, green, and red. And each zone comes with its own coordinate system and its own physical grid. And this is how we actually, on live, do zone transitions between your ship, empty space, space station, or a planet. And you will see, as I walk between those zones, I will, at real time, update it in that entity graph. And this all happens seamless. So for a client, this is completely transparent. You don't notice that. But this is actually what's happening when you step in or out into a ship. And this is very unique to our engine. No other engine has this zone system. And that allows us to do all the amazing stuff you saw in the videos before, transitioning in and out of planets.
Paul Reindel, I'm pretty sure worked on Elder Scrolls Online. One of the major people who is responsible for all of this worked on ESO. But that's the thing, is like, if they have a replication layer, I don't know if they have the zoning system like they do here. Because he specifically says right here, it is unique to StarEngine, it is unique to Star Citizen. No one else does this. If it wasn't Paul Reindel, it was someone else. But someone else who's responsible, who's been working on all of this. I just don't remember who. I remember they poached someone from Elder Scrolls.
Planets and go from the smallest scope to the largest scope. So everything we do in a shard, so this is like a mini level, like the mini PU level, is also persisted in this database. When we create new entities in our engine, in StarEngine, those entities get pushed into our entity graph, into our online database at real time, and then from there replicated to our clients. So if I go ahead and spawn a couple of plushies here, you will see they spawn, they get created immediately on my entity graph and replicated on the server and on the client. So let's spawn a couple more here. And you see this, the pengus I spawn in the other zone get attached to the other zone. And then if I go and transition one of those, they will also transition between the different zones. And the same works for ships or more complex entities. If I spawn this buggy here, you will see this one gets created with all its attachments and everything else attached to it. And this is just my small demo level here. On live, we have up to 600,000 dynamic entities that get created for one single chart. And this is just the initial state. After 2 weeks, 3 weeks of gameplay, when you guys go in and destroy stuff, spawn stuff, play around, it goes in the millions of entities. So this in itself is pretty amazing tech. The next time I want to talk about is our streaming system. Most engines do stream on texture or geometry. We actually stream entities, and we do stream persistent entities. So when I turn on the streaming system here and I walk into this, if I walk over to the red area, you will see that the purple area will stream out together with all the entities on that server. So it does not only stream out on my client, it actually streams out on that server. And when I come back in the green zone, that purple zone streams back in with all the entities in there with their full persistent state.
Basically what he's doing is he's demonstrating iteratively the component pieces of server meshing and the whole system. So like what he just did is he showed off server-side object container streaming. And this is an object container. He moved out and away from it so that way the server streamed it off. And this is part of why this was so important for Squadron 42. Because for Squadron 42, they run a localized version kind of a server-client relationship in order for it to run the simulation and stream in the area around you as you're moving around the map in the game. So that way it's not all loaded on at once. And it's, Squadron 42 and Star Citizen use very similar technology. It's why things are supposed to be backwards compatible. They built it that way so that way they wouldn't have to change things up dramatically going from one game to the other.
So now I have a second player join. Benoit is going to join me. So Ben, if you want to join, okay, I think you see him over there. Hey, Ben. Sorry. Nice. All right, I'm going to spawn a couple more penguins here. Because the next thing I want to talk about is new technology we are right now developing and we are about to put on the tech preview for you to play. And this is actually the replication layer split. And that's the big next step in our great vision, obviously, as you might know. So in this demo, my client and my servers, they are no longer directly connected. Actually, I have a new service running here, and that is our replication service. So my client is connected to this replication service, and my server is connected to this replication service. And the replication service, the sole purpose is to get all the entities which are in the entity graph and stream them to clients and servers which are connected to. And what's really cool about this is, let's do a little.
So the replication layer is the go-between for not only your connected clients and your connected servers, but also between those connected clients and servers and the entity graph. So that way, the replication layer will only stream in what is needed from the entity graph, given the zone you're in, or the zone that or object container that the server is responsible for, and not anything else. But it will also, the replication layer also updates for updates, changes to entities back to the entity graph as needed. So in order to maintain long-term state, in order to be able to essentially, when you log off and you create a save, when you store something, whenever you change the configuration of something, those things get that entity change, that entity state change gets replicated from the replication layer onto the entity graph. So that way it can be recalled again as needed. But things are stored on the replication layer until they're no longer needed. The interesting thing about the replication layer, and this is from when I talked to Benoit, is that they haven't found the upper limit for how many clients and servers, essentially for how many clients can connect to the entity or to the replication layer. And that's what part of the reason they haven't progressed further with the services that they need for dynamic server meshing, is because they need to get static server meshing in and scale that up to a certain point in order to find out at what point does the replication layer, at what point does that service start to become strained? Because at that point, that's when the different services like Atlas and the Shard Manager will do kind of like with server meshing, where if there are too many entities spawned, if there's too much demand in an area, they can they can subdivide that area or into the different object containers and have one server managing one portion, one object container, another server managing another part of that object container, or another object container like a parent container. Say the population on New Babbage gets too heavy, they can spin up a server for New Babbage while the original server is still managing all of Microtech. But if that demand also stresses the replication layer too much, they can also spin up another replicant. An individual replication layer is called a replicant. And so what they can do is, if the demand is too much between the connected servers and clients to a replication layer, they can spawn up another replication layer, so that in order to service a different portion of that subdivided area, and change all that. But those breaking points, those stress points, they can't find those until they start working into static server meshing, increasing player counts, adding more servers to the simulation, subdividing Stanton and Pyro into 2, 4, 8, 10 servers, what have you, and then adding more and more people to it to find out where that starts to get stressed, and at what points do they need to start spinning up additional servers as well as additional replicants to handle the load. So the witch space, actually, that was a question I asked Benoit specifically. The replication layer can crash in theory, but it is because the replication layer, the reason we have server crashes so frequently is because the servers, a lot of them are due to deadlocks in calculations, but also just running out of memory. And so A, this should help with a lot of that, but B, because of what the replication layer does, and because of how capable it is very lightweight and shouldn't run into issues with any sort of deadlocks or running out of memory. It's not like a dedicated game server where it has to do all these massively complex calculations. It doesn't have to do any of that, so it's not under the same, anywhere near the same levels of strains. He's like, so they have ideas on how to spin up, have redundant replicants in order to have that sort of thing, in case such a thing happens, because hardware can fail. Should be pretty lightweight and less gameplay programmer bad code dependent. Exactly. That's actually very similar to how Benoit explained it. But yeah, so it should be far more resilient than the servers. But he said that they already do have ideas for having redundant replicants, in order to mitigate that thing. Like if there's a hardware issue, if something happens, because things will happen. But he said that's a far less likely possibility than like what we're used to as server crashes.
Experiment here. I mean, you all know our game has bugs. It's still alpha, and sometimes
I'm listening. I grabbed
things
some
can
more water.
happen.
Be right back, guys.
So let's see what's happening when I kill my server here. And so this is my server, the actual console. So let's just shut it down. And yes, this is where you would usually see a 30K or something. You can see Benoit kind of froze there for a bit. And the buggy does a bit weird stuff. I can shoot those pingus, but the world is really in a frozen state right now. But I didn't disconnect, because I'm connected to the replication layer and not to the server anymore. In the meantime, I'm just starting a new server. Let's be a bit patient for it. It should come back online in a second. And as you can see, now that the server came back, it restored the state.
What they just demonstrated was a sort of initial implementation of crash recovery. And that's kind of how crash recovery will work in this first iteration. But there is more to it later on. But even with the separation of the replication layer before they add in their full implementation of crash recovery, which adds more to it, just by maintaining a connection to the replication layer, it will significantly improve our gameplay experience. So I'm trying to remember what Benoit said. So the other thing is your connection to the replication layer should also be more stable, is what Benoit was telling me, than the current way that we connect to the server. So that should help a lot with that. The one thing that he did mention that they're working on, and it's actually demonstrated on the progress tracker, is while while like the state of entities will persist, and you'll notice this hiccup for a new server can take a couple minutes to spin up, but it just depends on how much it has to load in. But the one thing, so say you are doing we've got these upcoming cargo missions, and you're doing a cargo mission, and you've got this load of cargo on your Caterpillar, your Hercules, or whatever, and the server crashes. Right now, the mission logic runs on the server, and so if the server crashes, you may have all those entities still in the back of your ship. And it'll pick back up where you left off. Where you were will persist in space. You'll just keep going, but the mission will die with the server, and so that's what they're working on, is making it so that way missions persist. And whether they do that on the replication layer or via a external service, he didn't know. He's like, that's a different team. That's different people that are working on that. I'm not up to speed on that. So that'll be interesting to see how they end up handling that situation. Because the other thing they have to do, that he did talk about, he's like, they're handling it in a similar way, is your missions have to persist across servers. So when you transition, when they do get the first iteration of server meshing in, and it's 2 servers in Stanton and 2 in Pyro, or whether if you transition from one server to another, if the mission logic was still running on that server, it wouldn't transfer. The way it works right now, it wouldn't transfer over to that next server if you're going from Microtech to ArcCore or something like that, or if you're transitioning from Stanton to Pyro. So that's one thing that they've been working on. You can see the work by the mission feature team and the engineers over there on that on the progress tracker. Let's see. Witch Space asks, did they say whether they will freeze folks and entities during recovery, or let folks continue to run around and try to sync it back up? Don't think he mentioned the demo. No, I don't think he mentioned the demo either, and I did not ask that question, but that is a very good question, because obviously you can see that Paul's player was able to move around, but the other person wasn't moving around. And so I wonder, if I'm assuming you'll just pop, if you just pop back up into existence, at that new point, once you reconnect, so it would be like a teleport, teleportation of some sort, as far as the other person sees. So, I mean, that's kind of what, I don't know. I don't know what the best solution is for that. And you'd probably know a lot better than me. So it'll be interesting to see how they implement that and what their thoughts are. Speakeasy, hey, good to see you. Glad you're here. We got a little bit more to go. We're just finishing up the PES and server meshing portion of the engine video. I've been going at it for over 3 hours now, but obviously, it's a hour and a half long video and a lot of really good information. I've just been trying to put some context into it in regards to what I've been reading in the monthly reports and dev statements and such. But glad you could come hang out. Northern Trooper says it will depend on the zones and how many resources are allocated to it. Yeah, it's just one of the many, many, many questions that we're going to be asking and hopefully seeing the answers to sooner rather than later.
It restored the state, and the simulation just continues to work as before. So this will be, again, this is very early tech, but this is a great benefit of what we have with our replication layer split. But there's one more thing. And let's try this thing again. I just killed my server, and I'm trying to do that again. But this time, we're doing something different. So let's first go in here. This is my development tool. I can talk about it in a second. So let's stop that server again. And restart. And this will take a little bit. I'm running this tool you see here. This is our internal development tool. This tool runs the entire stack of our game on this PC. This is obviously for development only, and I can do that with my small test level. But this really helps online devs and all people who work on the incredible, complicated tech we hear to be able to develop our game. And because I run everything on this PC, it's a bit slow. So let's wait and see what's happening here. All right. Simulation continues. I can see Ben moving again. Hey, Ben. However,
hey, Ben.
What just happened? Well, as you can see on my screen, I no longer have one server connected. I have 3 servers connected to this replication layer. So what you guys see here, this is the very first version of a working server mesh.
DGS mesh 00, 01, 02.
All right. So now I'm going to explain a little bit how this magic works, because it is.
And you can see how many entities this server is authoritative over and how many are replicated, and vice versa over here and here. And then how many clients are connected. And so you'll see changes to these numbers. If you watch it over and over again, I've watched it a couple times over and over again, you'll see these numbers change appropriately as they move around and as things move around. So it's pretty cool. Which face? This was cool to see in a live demo. Ballsy move by Paul. Yeah, he literally, let's just fucking send it. Let's see what happens. Speakeasy says, my question is, can they assign a server to handle financial transactions and another to do the water or whatever on the same shard? The ultimate goal is the move a lot of these services that run on the server onto the back end and run separately, just like the replication layer from the server. So that way, if the server crashes, these things persist. These things don't go away. And as you transfer between services, that information continues along with you. Yeah. So
It's truly magic. Each server, when it came up and the replication layer realized there are 3 servers, we assigned different zones to those servers. And we said, okay, server 1, you are the authority over the purple area. Server 2, you are the authority over the green area. And the last server is authoritative over the red area. You can still see that those servers have all those entities replicated, but only the entities within their zone are actually authoritative on that server. So while I'm in this green zone at the moment, my entity is simulated on that green server and just replicated on the other server. And now, as I transition between those zones, you will see that on that green server, I just lost authority, and on that purple server, I just gained authority. And because my player was replicated on both servers, this completely works seamless. And again, let's do that a couple of times. You see on my client here, I don't notice anything of that. This all happens behind the scene. And this doesn't work only on me. Let's turn on the zone color.
So Speakeasy says, sounds like the possibilities are endless. How much do Amazon Web Services servers cost? Curious. I don't know what they cost. I just know that the reason that they are working towards dynamic server meshing is because with static server meshing, if you have a set, think about how well the game runs when there's only like 5 people on a server, and it's a fresh server. Well, if you have Stanton and Pyro have 4 servers each. Yeah, Paul Randell came from Crytek. There's another dev who's on this team or on the networking team who came from ESO, if I remember correctly. I just remember reading about it a while back, but it's been a while. Oh gosh, what was I saying? If you have 4 servers for Stanton and 4 for Pyro, and you spin them all up in a static mesh when the game loads, and only 1 person or 5 people. Okay, yeah, there's someone else, but then you're paying for all those servers with very little usage on them. And so the idea is to be able to scale how many servers you're using up and down dynamically, so that way, as people log off and the player population playing the game goes down, you're also reducing the amount of servers you're using for not only, and this is the important part, for not only the dedicated game servers, the ones who are doing the simulation of the game, but also for the many servers that you'll be using to run these services in the back end, like the replication layer. So the entity graph doesn't scale as far as I know, but the plan is for things like the replication layer, like the air traffic control service, etc., to scale up as needed based off of demand. And obviously, you won't need as many of them as you will need dedicated game servers, the server nodes, because that the logic that the servers execute is very complex compared to what the other services do. But they will have to be able to scale up when we end up looking at shards that are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of players. Yeah, it was something, The Prisoner, it was something I remember reading years ago. Like, this is back in like 2020. So I don't know. But yeah.
And the object, the authority assignment on the client as well. You can see that even entities, as they transition into the other zone, seamlessly transition
clutch.
to that zone. And not only that, I can also interact with entities that are on the other side. So if I go on the green zone, for example, and I shoot this, I can still shoot that purple entity. And I can also just go ahead and destroy that buggy which sits on that other zone. There you go. Always fun.
Speakeasy, I don't think we're ever going to have a pay-to-play subscription ever. I think they'll do a subscription to like get things, but that funding model is just, it's really outdated. And I know a lot of people don't like the idea of microtransactions, but microtransactions make a lot of money, and there's a really easy way to make it so that way microtransactions work for the game. So it's I'm not worried about them making money, because all of PES and everything they have built and everything they're planning to build that is player owned offers more opportunity for customization than any other game ever. Like there's so much opportunity for monetization, and all they have to do is say, oh yeah, you can get it in game, or you can buy it for 99 cents on the website, buy it for $1, buy it for $2, buy it for $5. But and this is just my conspiracy theory, and Nazareth and I did a giant spectrum pulse on this, but I think that the timing of when CIG received that private investment of $45 million in 2018 and another $18 million, I think it was, in 2020. And those private investments coinciding with games like Fortnite and Warzone having just absolutely ridiculous sales. I don't think that's a coincidence at all, because that's how, as a venture capitalist, that's how you make your money back. You don't make your money back on just a little dividend every year. You make your money back on the company you invested in, making exponentially more revenue than they were initially, and the valuation of that company and your investment in it going up dramatically. If you think about it, we're going to have persistent habs, persistent hangars. You're going to be able to build a base. Your ship and its interior will persist. Your character and all their accoutrements will persist, and you can monetize all those things. And you can have them in game. But you can also give people access, like people like me. I'm a space dad. I have very little time to play. I don't mind throwing a little bit of money here and there for just some random thing that, oh, I like that, I want it. I don't want to fly across the system to go get it, or grind that reputation to go get it. And people can do that. People who have plenty of time to play can go do it, and they will earn the things in game just like they do in every other game. But as long as you make it available in game and you don't make it exclusive, it will still sell and make a crap ton of money. I was thinking more like skins for your weapons, skins for your clothes, and decorations for your habs and such. Yeah, Witchbase says there's absolutely massive scope for selling cosmetics, blueprints, data, ships, armor. Yeah, everything that you would use to customize everything that you will own in game, it can be monetized, and that's what makes Warzone and Fortnite literally many, many, many billions of dollars. Billions. So, yeah, I don't like macro transactions. I hate the idea of selling ships for hundreds of dollars. Will it go away? No. But will it be the primary funding mechanism for Star Citizen in the future? I don't think so at all. It's a horribly inefficient funding mechanism for the amount of developer hours to create a ship and then only be able to market that ship to the people with the dispensable income to pay for it versus a prop artist making ads, stupid ads. Okay, Socially Confused says the ads are done, so let's get back to it. Back into the server meshing stuff.
To blow stuff up, right? All right. So there's more to this. The first thing I will do, let's spawn a fresh buggy. I just destroyed my old one. When I go into this buggy, I will become part of the aggregate, and that means that now my buggy and myself will transition authority together. And this is how we make sure that my player, while he's driving this buggy, is always authoritative on the same server. So you can see, as I drive around with this buggy between the zones, I will switch between the different servers. All right. But there's more to this. So remember when I turned on the streaming earlier? The same streaming mechanics work here as well. Like, obviously, in this example right now, you can see all those servers, they have all those entities replicated. And it's a little bit wasteful because you have 3 servers, all need to replicate all those entities. And that's where streaming comes into play. I can turn on streaming here, and you will see that suddenly my purple server no longer has the red area streamed in. And the red server no longer has the purple area streamed in. So let's see what's happened when I drive my buggy backwards into that into the red zone. What happens on that purple server? And I just disappear. So right now, on this server, there's only Benoit replicated. And Benoit, if you come to me over in the red area, you will see that now on this server, there's no client at all. And in theory, we could now completely stream out the entire area on that server. or stream in a new area. And you will also see, as I drive back into the green area, I will magically reappear on that purple server. And this obviously works on the other side as well. Let's get a couple more player join. I have a couple more QA in the back, so you can just see the whole thing running at live.
So Speakeasy, I mean, this isn't dynamic server meshing, but the getting to dynamic v1, and it's actually very smart that the way they did dynamic version 1 and dynamic version 2 is it allows them to quickly move to a dynamic system based off of demand without having to go straight to the dynamically scalable zones. Instead, they'll be able to just set fixed zones that they'll be able to spin up and down, and it's not a perfect solution, but it's a really good interim solution that allows them to move to much higher player counts in the shorter term. They're a lot closer to dynamic than we think. What Benoit told me is that the biggest step getting to dynamic is getting static out there and getting us testing it and straining the system so that way they get the data they need in order to continue to develop the systems, the services that will tell the game to scale up and down as needed.
Running in live with a bit more things going on. Let me get out of this buggy. And you will see on each server renderer which clients are currently replicated on those servers and which clients are actually authoritative on those servers. And you can see this, the green server, because it's the middle one, has most entities replicated. And then you can see this purple one at the moment only has one client replicated. Yeah. So yes, this is pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It has been a long time to come to this point, and I just can't put in words how much tech and work we had to put into this. Big shout outs to the network team, big shout outs to the online services team, big shout outs.
So Witchbase says, I have concerns about things like turret gunners on a javelin and what authority they operate in. Will there be a separate internal container that while seated they are not in? And a shell container that is part of the space battle? Will be fun to see the path they choose. Yeah, I think that's not something that they have to broach in the near term, but eventually once they get to the point where, hey, a javelin could be its own server, I think at that point they're going to have to, cross that line, cross that bridge. It's amazing that he pulled that demo off pretty cleanly. I'm sure he rehearsed it a little bit, but still being able to do that well at CitizenCon, anything Star Citizen, is very impressive. And so it's just, it was very well executed. The other thing that Benoit mentioned to me, and this is a big question that I had, because like if you follow the unofficial roadmap to dynamic server meshing, it's a very well cited resource to understanding all the tech that goes into server meshing. Leading up to the PES and the replication layer and server meshing, there's a lot of tech, a lot of pieces of technology, a lot of services that have been built and are being built. But one thing that was mentioned in the May 2022 letter from the chairman is that there were 12 new services for PES, and 4 new services planned for server meshing. And then in I think it was September of last year, October, SCL for PES, they mentioned how they're delivering PES with 8 of the 12 new services, the minimum viable product to make it more manageable. And so I asked him, I was like, okay, so in reference to that, like, where are we with those other services and, for PES and for server meshing? And he's like, it's a really good question. And actually, those services are more for when we start scaling up to dynamic server meshing. We really don't have more roadblocks in the way of additional services that need created between us and static server meshing right now. It's really just the replication layer, and we want to get crash recovery in with the first version of server meshing. So that way, the way he explained it to me is that if they did the basic version that they talked about in that sort of schedule image, and actually I'm going to pull it up really quick. But the basic first version of server meshing. Let's see. So, let's see. Oh, letter from the chairman. Is it? It's this one, I believe. Nope. Nope, it's this one. Okay. So let's see, Control F, services. Bingo, it's down here. All right. So we can open up this image. Here, open image in new tab. And zoom. And we go up here. This is about where we are right now. And then we're coming up on the tech preview. Obviously, this is a year late, but this is, they're going to want to get I don't know if they're going to get the preview channel of server, the first version of server meshing in the preview channel before the end of the year. It depends on how the testing goes for the replication layer of the for the separation of the replication layer and crash recovery. Because it goes from the preview channel to PTU to live. And then they start working on the next thing because they want to get all the data they need in order to make sure it's ready to go before they move on to the next step. But I think it's possible. But that first version that they want for 4.0, 4 DGS nodes. So 2 servers for Stanton, 2 for Pyro, with one single replication layer hybrid service, managing all 4 of them in the connected clients. And so we don't need additional services to run these. We need additional services for getting to dynamic server meshing. So the future plans are separating the replication layer into a horizontal scalable service, as well as working on a dynamic DGS mesh that allows DGS nodes to dynamically scale up and down and split simulation into dynamic areas. So these are the 2 things that are really needed in order to get us to dynamic V1. And that is where we have specifically named zones. Yeah, the easy matchmaking task. Well, so I asked Benoit about matchmaking because we were asking about that early in the year, like, when's the matchmaking changes coming in? And he said they are going to make some changes to matchmaking in the short term for this for static server meshing, but they're not going to do too much because of how quickly they want to get to dynamic server meshing V1, where the matchmaking logic becomes much less important because of having fewer shards. So we'll see. That was one thing where he didn't go into as much depth in it. But let's see, is it? Let's see. Let's zoom back out. Is it in this one? Control F. Dynamic. No, it's in the other one. One shard per region. I think that we'll have, for dynamic server meshing v1, I think we're more likely to be working towards the multiple shards per region, but far fewer than we have now. In order to have, East Coast and West Coast and, maybe a couple Europe or something like that. I don't know how they'll break about. Witchbase probably would have a good indication of, how they might actually break that up. But yeah, matchmaking is going to be a challenge. It's but the way he explained it to me is they didn't want to do too much, just because of how those challenges will change when they go to dynamic server meshing versus static. So they didn't want to put a bunch of effort into it and then have that effort not be useful or relevant when they make the transition. So let's find the other letter from the chairman. It was letter from the chair's not. So that's 1869. We need 19778. So this one. This is the letter from the chairman from December of last year. And let's look for dynamic. And where is it? Here we go. So this is the most recent plan. And this is, a really good, this is all still very relevant. Even though it's almost a year old, it's still accurate and relevant. But so we're talking about, start with static server meshing, where different servers are assigned to simulate different entity zones in a star system. Entity zones, sometimes referred to as local grids, are separate simulation areas. The inside of a spaceship is a different zone to the space around which the spaceship flies. A planet is a different zone than the star system zone where all the planets and moons exist in it. So right now, a single server is simulating the entire entity zone of Stanton, but they can subdivide it. And a landing zone can also be a different zone nested inside the planet zone, known zone nested inside these, or nested in the star system zone. At first, these servers will be bound to fixed zones, but we will quickly move to dynamic server meshing v1, where we assign servers dynamically to entity zones based on gameplay and simulation load. This will be a much more efficient use of servers in the cloud, as you only need servers where the players are, whereas static server meshing, you have servers assigned to the zones even if there are no players there. And so this is where they need to get that data from us on the load that we can create in these different static zones in order to figure out how they need to go about spinning up and down more servers and more replicants, individual replication layers. Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get a global shard. I think regional shards is just fine. And I also think with the way things are, like I connect to Australia and I have, ping in the mid 100s. And it's still very playable, and they haven't even done much to optimize it to hide any sort of latency. Obviously it makes a much bigger difference, in the FPS realm. But they still can do a lot of work in order to hide latency issues for if you're playing off your regional shard. So yeah, it'll be interesting. But yeah, this is where they talk about dynamic server meshing v1 and server meshing v2. And this is me just spitballing, but I honestly think that we could get, dynamic server meshing v1, in like the preview channel before the end of next year, because they've already done a lot of the legwork for the shard manager service and the Atlas service. I think are the ones that Benoit mentioned that are coming to mind that allow for the scaling up and down of servers and replicants to allow for dynamic server meshing v1. But with this initial version of static server meshing, each time they spin up a new shard, it'll spin up all 4 of those servers we talked about and the replication layer, even if there's only one person on it. So things get very expensive very quickly. Yeah, they do keep saying quickly, and I think it's because a lot of the legwork, the initial legwork has already been done. It's more of a, we need to get this out in the player's hands to test it in order to continue that work. Yeah. And the 890 thing is that's all going to get better with server meshing, and it's even going to get better with the separation of the replication layer. Because the other thing is, oh gosh, how to find that quickly. I should have bookmarked it. That was my fault. Let's see, Control F. Here we go. So this is that 321 update coming from Balt. Balt is Benoit. And if you go down here, it's in one of the comments. Okay. So this person asks, so if I understand the system correctly, then this separation should take a lot of load off the servers and open up a fair amount of resources on them. I know you have said we wouldn't see much difference. However, with this update, are we likely to see improvements in server-side systems such as AI, item and inventory handling, and maybe some improvements to desync issues if the servers achieve the target frame rates you guys have? Or will all that need meshing? Any info, blah, blah, blah. Benoit says, we are expecting performance gain on the game server, since the game server itself will no longer have to fan out messages to connected clients and manage the replication state itself. This is the replication layer's job. Running on tech preview will, with real player behaviors, will allow us to quantify this gain as well as identify areas of the code that might prevent us from having a gain, which will need to be addressed before we graduate the replication layer for live. They won't bring it to live until they get the gain that they are looking for after having addressed the issues that we're going to bring to light. But yeah, so I think that's about everything that I wanted to cover this evening in relation to the future of StarEngine video panel. We don't need to do all the back clapping, but needless to say, they're all very happy. A lot of great stuff coming from the engine in terms of graphics, with the clouds, fogs, and weather, fire, water. I feel like it's the Earth, Wind, and Fire. The all the visuals, the upscaling, the renderer, global illumination and ray tracing, star class, star hair, and Maelstrom is just nuts. And of course, I love the audio stuff, but then last and not least, PES, replication layer, and server meshing. There's a lot of stuff to be excited about with the engine. So I just want to say thank you guys for hanging out with me. I really appreciate, you're being active and talking in chat. Thank you, Witchface, for bringing up a lot of those really good questions with your technical background. Really appreciate it. Before we leave, if anyone's going to be hanging on later, I would love a recommendation for someone that we can raid. It's always important to pay it forward and share the love after receiving that great raid from Paul's stream. Yeah, Witchface, I can't wait for the map UI video to come out because I'm definitely going to go over that one. That's the biggest quality of life. No, not a pain at all. I really appreciate it. It's always, I don't have this background. I just read a lot. I read a lot and I study because I'm curious, but this is so not my, I do medicine. I'm a flight medic. But yeah. Oh, Abdi's on. Let's go raid Abdi. Hell yes. Let's show Abdi some love. I got to meet Abdi at the CitizenCon. So absolutely go over and show Abdi some love. Give him a follow. And you guys have a good night and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.